the NHS coming very soon.
There's nothing to it.
It's just sort of, only 6% fewer people are going to be waiting 4 months.
Yeah.
Plus
I know.
4 months to see a consultant when they've got suspected cancer. This is the low standards we set for ourselves. And then, I mean, the row between Elon Musk and Nigel Farage. I'm with Nigel Farage all the way on this.
I think most of our listeners and viewers are, from what I can gather this morning. So you'll be continuing more of that. Julia Hartley-Brewer coming up for the first time this year. And of course, I'll be back for the second time tomorrow from 6 a.m. Enjoy the rest of the day. Don't bother with Keir Starmer's speech. It's not going to be that interesting. See you tomorrow.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Well, a very, very good morning to you. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk, the home of common sense. A very happy new year to you. I've been away for a couple of weeks in a much sunnier, warmer, blue-skied Mexico. And very lovely it was too, but it is fabulous to be back, even with the same lurgy I went away with, which apparently everyone has got. I know a lot of people are back at work for the first time today. Yeah, well done, everybody, especially people making it through the sludge and the snow in large parts of the country. We'll talk more about the weather later in this hour. But my goodness me, when you talk about the sludge of our political debate, wow, that has really been going on apace, has it not, in the last few weeks? So much to talk about, so much I want to hear from you about as well. So do get in touch. Don't forget, of course, whether you are listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, plenty of ways to get in touch. I'll tell you what we're going to be asking you about in just a couple of moments. But I bet you could probably guess, because you know what you're talking about. But coming up in this hour, we are going to, of course, talk more about Elon Musk calling for Nigel Farage to be replaced as the leader of Reform UK, claiming he doesn't have what it takes in a spat over Tommy Robinson. He's also tweeted this morning on X that asking whether the US should liberate Britain from their tyrannical government. This as Keir Starmer is due to speak in just a couple of moments about his plan to tackle NHS waiting lists with more community diagnostic centres, surgical hubs, more use of technology to improve patient choice and tackle inefficiencies. I mean, yeah, it's going to be a real game changer, isn't it? No, it's not. Also, the Prime Minister is expected to defend his record on tackling grooming gangs after Elon Musk accused him of being complicit in the rape of Britain, and even called for Home Office Minister Jess Phillips to be sent to prison over her failures. Also, millions of people, as I say, returning to work and school this morning will face more snow, ice and rain, with several weather warnings remaining in place across the UK. As I say, more on that in the next hour. This is Talk. Welcome to the home of common sense. Welcome, of course, to our favourite guest every Monday morning, and that is, of course, commentator Sam Armstrong, who joins us right now. Very good morning to you.
Good morning, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. I had to apologise to him as soon as he walked in. Sorry, I've got the same lurgy I gave you in December. I've still got it, but you've recovered at least.
I know, thank you for that. That was
You're welcome.
The Christmas present I always
made a
wanted.
lot of friends with that in the office, got to be honest with you. Genuinely, that smile is a fake smile. He's not happy with me. Anyway, apologies, and to everyone on the planes there and back as well. I'm not sorry about that too. Now, look, Keir Starmer's just started speaking. You know he means business because he's rolled up his sleeves. Can't tell you how much I hate politicians rolling up their sleeves unless they're required to when they're visiting in a hospital. But no, he's trying to look the business. He's got a load of NHS staff standing behind him. Hopefully they'll manage not to die of boredom, or at least they can get probably more prompt treatment than the rest of us could get if they are standing behind the Prime Minister today. He's announcing his plans for the NHS. But you know what? That is not leading the news. Partly, I think, because we've heard it all before. Partly also because just no one trusts that any of these things that Labour are going to announce are going to make any real difference. But all the focus is on Elon Musk and Nigel Farage, a spat which it turns out was pretty much all about Tommy Robinson, who, for some bizarre reason, Elon Musk and many of the people he seems to follow on social media, on X, his platform, seem to think is a political prisoner and is currently behind bars because he's a free speech campaigner. No, he's in contempt of court after outrageous libel against a young Muslim lad at school who was the victim of a horrific attack at school. And then Tommy Robinson kept repeating completely false claims that he was somehow, to blame for harassing girls at the school. I mean, complete lies, proven to be lies in court. Was told if he repeated these claims, he'd be in contempt of court. He did again and again and again, and came back to Britain knowing fully well he was going to end up in prison, which is where he is. If it was your kid he was talking about, you'd be happy he was in prison too. He's not a political prisoner. He's broke the law, and that's why he's in prison. Now, lots of people who break the law don't go to prison, including, of course, as we know, people who are, we use this phrase, grooming gangs. Let's call them what they are. Rape gangs, that's what they are. And they didn't go to prison, they didn't get prosecuted, they weren't even arrested, they weren't stopped, they were allowed to carry on their crimes for many years, still doing so today. Right now, in more than 50 towns and cities across this country, right now, today, there are Pakistani heritage Muslim rape gangs who are beating, raping, torturing, threatening violence and death even to working-class white girls, and not enough is being done about it. Should Jess Phillips, the Home Office Minister, go to prison? Should Elon Musk send over, a rescue bid to liberate the people of Britain from their tyrannical government? Should Keir Starmer be ousted? Should Nigel Farage be ousted as leader of Reform because he's not willing to take someone like Tommy Robinson into his party? Where do we start, Sam?
Well, look, let's start with this. The existence of these gangs, either historically or certainly currently, is a stain of shame on this country. It is also a death knell, in my view, for the belief that multiculturalism is a unequivocal, always totally perfect good.
I never thought it was.
We were told, I mean, even, and I dare say this, the King in his speech this year, it was as if diversity was the only thing that this country had to be proud of. I just don't think so. I actually think our history, our laws, our cultures...
None of which is based on diversity.
None of which...
Or multiculturalism.
All of which was based on a slow development over 1,000 years or more. But look, we have huge problems in this country as a direct result now of having at least 30 years, if not 60 years, of mass migration.
Yep.
Those problems are serious and they deserve to be fixed. People who say that are doing a public service and deserve to be praised for it. Now, Tommy Robinson did do some
Stephen
of that.
Yaxley Lennon is his real name, of course. Yeah.
Did do some of that. And to be fair to him, he did so earlier than most.
Yep.
That is not why he is in prison.
Yeah.
He is in prison, as you say, because he made a libelous statement about an individual.
About a kid.
He was told it was libelous by a court of law, the High Court. There was a full trial. He had all the chance to provide the evidence. Couldn't do so. He was told, unless you can come back to this court with some new evidence, don't say it again. He did it again. Now, look, I work for the Free Speech Union. I'm a total and utter free speech campaigner, and I'm probably more of a free speech absolutist than most people you will meet. But can we all not agree that we need to have a law that says you cannot run around saying a lie about somebody indefinitely, continually, when it's been proven to be true? And that people, when they break those court orders, deserve to be punished. Maybe not the first time, and it wasn't on the first time, but certainly by the 20th, 23rd, 50th time, whatever it was.
He wasn't just saying it in a tweet. Tommy Robinson was putting out a video.
Broadcasting in Parliament Square.
Yeah.
I mean, he knew exactly what he was doing. There will be many, myself included, who suspect, to an extent, he was looking for a particular result, and he
was looking for a bit of martyrdom, wasn't he? Doesn't he? Am I not right in thinking he makes more money when he's behind bars?
Well, look...
Quite coincidentally, the crowdfunders for Tommy's kids, etc., etc.
And he seems to alternate between going on holiday and going behind bars. But look, none of that, in my view, negates or chips away in any way about the seriousness of this topic. And we should not let one particular individual, who I think we can all accept is, at least to an extent, in it for himself, to detract from the people who are actually suffering. And if you want to know who's falsely imprisoned, if you want to know who is suffering unjustly, it is the working class white girls that continue in this country to this day to be detained, to be raped, to be abused routinely on an industrial scale by people we should have had behind bars and out of the country a very, very, very long time ago.
I think, frankly, a lot of those people shouldn't have been in the country in the first place. And again, some of these men, they've got like dual nationality. Funnily enough, as soon as they get convicted, they renounce their Pakistani half of their nationality, and then they can't be deported. Well, I mean, shouldn't be an option. Again, people like me have been saying since, early 2000s, this mass immigration from countries with people who are not showing our values, in terms of views of women, gay people, things like that. Of freedom of speech, blasphemy laws, things like that. I always thought it was a bad idea. Never thought multiculturalism was a good idea. I think our culture, the Western liberal culture, is the superior and best culture in the world, and we should not give that way. If you want to live in a culture where you can just rape girls with impunity because you're a man and you're of a certain ethnicity or whatever, then fine. Well, do that and do with that in your country you come from, or not sure why you need to come here to do that. But here's the thing: we know this happened on an industrial scale. We're going to be talking to Maggie Oliver. I know she's been on various different shows, and she's someone I've spoken to for many, many years about this. She was the whistleblower in the Rochdale grooming rape gang case. Now. People talking about, people haven't been talking about this. This comes back into the news, just like literally flashes back into the news last week. Why? Because of Elon Musk picking up on people, writing tweets about this. In particular, a letter from Jess Phillips, Home Office Minister, basically saying to... I think it was to Oldham, wasn't it? Oldham Council saying, we need to have a report into this, saying, well, no, you need to carry out your own one rather than a national inquiry. Now, the idea that we've got local councils where local councillors, social workers, NHS, the police, everybody involved basically allowed this cover-up to happen. The idea that a local place can then do that in independent inquiry is absurd. demands for a full national independent inquiry, one that focuses only on this issue, not the previous one, this independent inquiry into child sexual abuse. That actually covered a whole range of different issues, barely touched actually on the grooming gangs issue over this sort of 7-year period. So there's certainly an argument for that. But the battle royal has been between Elon Musk and Keir Starmer. And Keir Starmer is expected, when he finishes his speech in Surrey this morning about the NHS, to be asked questions about Elon Musk's criticism of him. There's also now this battle royal between Elon Musk and Nigel Farage, because Elon Musk was expected to give something like $100 million, I think, at one point, to Nigel Farage in reform. Big fan of reform. And suddenly, out of the blue yesterday, he tweets, posts on social media, that he believes that Nigel Farage needs to be replaced needs a new leader. Farage doesn't have what it takes. Nigel Farage responded saying, "This is a surprise. Elon is a remarkable individual on this. I'm afraid I disagree. It's very clear this is about Tommy Robinson." Nigel Farage says, "My view remains that Tommy Robinson is not right for reform, and I never sell out my principles." Who's right and who's wrong on that, Sam?
What? Nigel Farage is unequivocally, absolutely, totally right on this issue. Just put the rights and wrongs of the situation aside for 1 minute. Nigel Farage is very clear about what he's attempting to do, which is to replace the Conservative Party as the predominant voice of centre-right opinion in this country. You don't do that. You don't do that by getting into bed with the likes of Tommy Robinson. For 10% of the British public, perhaps, he's a man that is a real voice and
a hero,
extremely powerful. But for everybody else, he is the biggest, hugest turn-off you can possibly imagine. So Nigel Farage is making a very careful, very clever, very thought-through political decision. But where this goes wrong is that Nigel Farage decided to get into bed with Elon Musk in the first place.
Are you telling me the Conservative Party? I know you helped run the campaign for Robert Jenrick and the Conservatives and others. Now look, you're telling me that if Elon Musk said to Kemi Badenoch or Robert Jenrick, if he'd won, "I'd like to give you $100 million," that you would be going, "Oh no, not Elon, no. Oh, give me a break, Sam."
Here's the thing: self-made multi-billionaire, very successful businessmen in particular that develop sudden interest in politics always think in the end that they know best how to run it. And that's where you get into problem, when they stop being a donor and start being a player. And look, Nigel Farage, there's the old saying, if you lie down with dogs, don't be surprised if you wake up with fleas. Elon Musk is at times as mad as a dog, and it's no surprise that this was going to break down and tear itself apart at one point.
I wonder how long actually Donald Trump and Elon Musk will be able to work together, because I think the two big egos, Elon Musk getting a lot of the coverage, that Donald Trump's not going to like that. But here's the thing for me, it's like I've always said, I want big money out of British politics. I think it's fundamentally corrupting. It impacts. It means that anybody who gives even £100,000, let alone $100 million, has more influence on a political party and their policies than you or I as individual voters. That is unacceptable to me. I would not allow donations over 5 or 10 grand each from any company or any individual. I would stick to that. However, my view was, you know what? If all the other political parties are taking massive donations, and if Reform get massive donations, then fair dues. And I think and I wrote a piece for the Sun before I went away saying, I think this could be an absolute game changer. That money, that nous, But again, it comes clearly with too many strings attached. We'll see what happens. Well, I want to hear from you. Elon Musk has called for Nigel Farage to be replaced as the leader of Reform UK. He claims he doesn't have what it takes. This is a big spat over Tommy Robinson in particular. I want to know whose side are you on? That's simple. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. You can text the word TALK, then your message to 87222. You can get in touch, ironically, on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate measures. I would absolutely love to hear from you. Let me know what you think about this. Are you on Elon Musk's side? Are you on Nigel Farage's side? Do you think that they should still try and get the money? Should they allow a foreign billionaire to have influence at all? Should they ever have wanted to try and get that money? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. And what do you make of what Elon Musk has had to say about the US where they should liberate Britain from their tyrannical government? Do we have a tyrannical government? Well, right now, Keir Starmer's delivering a speech on NHS reform. He says, with his speech, his sleeves rolled up, "This is the year we roll up our sleeves and reform the NHS." God, he does like a really obvious metaphor, doesn't he? He said Labour would give patients more flexibility in appointments and improve the NHS app. He also said care will be moved closer to where people live with more local diagnostic centres. Believe it when you see it, when it actually makes a difference. Love to hear your thoughts on that as well. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Up next, going to take a break, and then we're going to hear from Maggie Oliver. She is the former detective constable at Greater Manchester Police who blew the whistle on the Rochdale grooming gang rape cases. We're going to find out what she makes of what's been going on in the last week, and what she makes of calls for a new independent inquiry. Who would she trust to run it if it ever happened? This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
People out of hospital and treat them in the community where that's appropriate, getting rid of some of the pointless outpatient appointments that people don't need. So there are a wide range of reforms we're putting in place, as well as the investment to deliver the shorter waiting times and higher patient satisfaction that we had under the last Labour government that's been squandered in the last 14 years.
Now, you mentioned about the offering patients more choice. I believe that they could be offered anything up to 5 hospitals to choose from. How feasible is that?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Great to have your company. Great to have the company of commentator Sam Armstrong as well. Just before we get to my next guest, just want to read out some of your messages already coming in about this battle between Elon Musk and Nigel Farage. Musk has called for Farage to be replaced as leader of Reform UK, claiming he doesn't have what it takes. Whose side are you on? Maria's got in touch to say Nigel Farage, 100%, the only man who can save Britain, she says. Robbie says, neither side. I'm on the side of homogenous nation-state democracies without a ruling elite and their gatekeepers. Penny says, I'm on Nigel's side. I like Elon, but this is a step too far. Greg says it would help if Elon explained what it takes means. Have what it takes to achieve what exactly? Samuel says, it's not you, is it, Sam? Samuel says, I don't believe he should be replaced, but he's very foolish falling out with Musk over something that could have easily been avoided. Well, except, I mean, he didn't criticise Musk. He just said they have a difference of opinion. He's got a right to his opinion. I mean, I'm not quite sure what you could do if you're not planning to let Tommy Robinson join your party. But there we are. Love to hear your thoughts. Get in touch, 0344 499 1000. Right now, let's get the thoughts of someone whose opinion is far more worthwhile than most of our opinions on the issue of the grooming, let's call them what they are, rape gangs, because she was the whistleblower in the Rochdale gang case. Maggie Oliver, former detective constable with Greater Manchester Police. A very, very good morning to you, Maggie.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. Now, I know you've been speaking to Talk and other media over the last week after this whole thing blew up, pretty much out of the blue. Just first question, really, what did you make of this suddenly coming back into the news, basically because of an Elon Musk tweet?
You know what, Julia? I am grateful for anything that brings this back onto a national public platform, because it is such a monumental failure of decades in this country. So anything that draws us back into these issues, for me, is worthwhile. I think what we have to be careful of, though, Julia, is that we don't deflect from the central issues of this, which is children being raped and being failed by the authorities. And what normally happens is we get a 5-minute soundbite and then it fades away and nothing happens. Personalities come and go, but the issues remain. And I feel like, I feel it's Groundhog Day for me. I keep going round and round the same hamster wheel, and I even get sick and tired of the sound of my own voice, because I've been saying these things for so long, but they're still there, they're still a problem, and children's lives are being ruined.
And this is the thing, this isn't something that happened in the past that needs to be rectified now. This is happening right now to thousands upon thousands of girls right now, today, in 50-plus towns and cities. The men who are carrying this out are not being arrested, they're not being prosecuted, they're not going to jail. If they are of dual nationality or foreign nationality, they're not being deported. They are still there doing what they do. Now, when you broke this, I mean, how many years ago was it now when you actually resigned from the police in Greater Manchester to basically whistleblow on the Rochdale rape gangs?
Yeah, I resigned in October 2012, but in the 18 months before that, I'd worked on the Rochdale case, and what I saw and had seen on another case in 2005 was gross criminal neglect. And I tried for 18 months. I went to the Chief Constable, Peter Foy, I went to the Home Office, I went to the Children's Commissioner, I went to the Independent Office for Police Conduct. Nobody wanted to listen. And I faced a choice, either carry on with my job, which I loved, and, turn away from this, or resign and speak publicly. Now, I chose to resign because I believe that this is scandalous and it destroys children's lives. And if I don't say anything, I'm as bad as those who turned away repeatedly over decades. And I've not changed my opinion. I'm sad that I had to do that, to speak the truth.
Well, I mean, it's not sad. I mean, it's outrageous that you had to do that. There's some of the details, it seems to me a lot of people haven't been aware of some of the more gruesome details all over Twitter. But I mean, girls being, plied with drink and drug, met from their care homes or outside the school gates by men who, 2 or 3 times their age, often plying them with gifts, the free takeaway, the taxi home, and then drugging them, pretending they were their boyfriends. Of course, these girls, some of them, hadn't really been shown much attention and love before. Others actually from perfectly happy homes. Quite extraordinary that they were targeted, and when the dads tried to get involved, they were the ones who ended up being arrested. But girls basically taken to these rape houses, being raped, on an industrial scale by men old enough to be their fathers and grandfathers. Men who were living perfectly respectable lives in the outer community, being branded, being tortured, being burnt, being spat on. Girls turning up at A&E, pregnant, with horribly, needing surgery for their wounds from some of these attacks. Nothing being done. A social worker organising for one girl to be fostered by the parents of the man who was raping her and allowing her sort of an Islamic marriage, Sharia marriage with him. I mean, some of the stories are just so beyond reason. You think, well, there must be a Hollywood movie. This can't be real. But this was happening. Now, here's the thing. It was happening. Do you believe that this was happening to white working class girls, because the perpetrators were men of Pakistani heritage. But often it was talked about they were Asian men. They weren't Asian men. They were men quite specifically from Pakistani heritage, many of them even born in this country. They were Muslim Pakistani men. Was that aspect of them being Pakistani, being Muslim, or being immigrant, or from immigrant families, was that a major factor in this, or could this just as easily have been any other ethnic group?
You know what, Julie, I'm asked this question all the time, and I believe that was one of the major factors that this has been allowed to evolve, develop, and has not been addressed. I think the other half of that is that it was very much a class issue as well.
Yeah.
That an attitude amongst the elite, amongst the politicians, that children from these very often unhappy backgrounds, they are vulnerable because they are craving attention, craving love. They are sitting ducks. The attention should be on the predators, not just the children and deciding, they've made a lifestyle choice. We knew what was going on. I knew 20 years ago. And when I hear senior politicians and people working in these places saying, the children are complicit in their abuse, it absolutely enrages me. Focus on the abusers. Question, why are they doing it? They're doing it because they get away with it. Nobody has addressed it. Nobody wants to get
But was it because they thought working class white girls, they could get away with it? They thought they were sluts and slags. They didn't rape them. There was some evidence that was given in court by some of those defendants who ended up getting guilty verdicts, basically saying, look, these white girls, they're there for the taking, basically. They walk around, they don't show modesty, they're sexually active, they're for us to use as we see fit. Do you think that was part of the attitude?
Yeah, I really do, Julia. And I've often said, if this was the Chief Constable's daughter or it was Keir Starmer's daughter, would they say they were making a lifestyle choice? No, they wouldn't. These kids were cast on the scrap heap and nobody was fighting their corner. I have a duty. I'm not speaking on behalf of the victims. They have their own voices. But my job, I have seen hundreds, if not thousands of victims of these gangs. I'm not saying that these are the only child abusers that we have.
Of course not.
But I would be saying if it was in, I would speak quite openly and say the same things about the Archbishop of Canterbury, covering up.
Well, indeed. I mean, this is the thing. A lot of the focus then became, we can't talk about this because this becomes, this is a talking point for, the Tommy Robinsons, for the far right, because you're just stirring up racial hatred, community tensions. And that was the excuse given by lots of counsellors, by the police, by the social workers, by everybody involved. Oh, don't get involved, it's all too difficult. But the reality is it was because of their ethnicity and their religion that they weren't prosecuted. If they had been white, they would have been prosecuted.
It's true, Julia. I mean, we've spoken lots of times, and that on the Rochdale case, one of the girls was made pregnant just when she was 13. I worked on the drama 3 Girls that told her story. We had a fetus. We had DNA. That man was not charged with rape.
And that's statutory rape. It doesn't matter that he claimed she wanted to have sex. She's not able legally to consent to sex. It is a crime automatically.
And you know what, Julia? Keir Starmer was the Director of Public Prosecutions. He worked with the Chief Crown Prosecutor on the Rochdale case because that was the first case that we had serious charges. But I would say they weren't serious enough. She was 12 when they began to rape her, and she got pregnant when she was just 13. So they took the easy route and charged that man with sexual activity with a child, with trafficking. Those men were meant to be deported. They weren't. Yeah. And what I would say, Julia, I would bring this as well into the ICSA National Abuse Inquiry. It was too wide, too long, 7 years, £100 million. The organised network strand was given 10 days. Yeah. One victim was allowed to speak. I was one of several non-institutional call participants who were denied any opportunity to say a word. They rolled out Chief Constable after senior police officer after senior social worker. The victims did not get a look in.
The victims, the whistleblowers, the very people who were in charge, who allowed the cover-up to go on, were the people who had their say. Maggie, I mean, that tells us an awful lot. I want to talk more about Keir Starmer's role, and I want to talk more about whether an independent inquiry, and you or now, would make a difference. We're going to take a very quick break, and then I want to hear back from you. Lots of people are getting in touch on the phone lines. Give us a call with your reaction to what Maggie Oliver has to say. 0344 499 1000. More from the wonderful, the amazing Maggie Oliver, because if you want to be praising people for bringing this up, it's people like Maggie Oliver who put her career on the line, literally gave up her career to be able to try and save these girls, actually did the real stuff to try and save the lives of these girls. We'll come back to her in just a couple of moments. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. Welcome back to the show. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. We're still talking with Maggie Oliver. She's a former detective constable with Greater Manchester Police. She resigned from that role back in 2012 to whistleblow on the Rochdale grooming, let's call them what they are, rape gang case. Maggie, thanks for joining us and staying with us over that break. Let's talk about Keir Starmer and his role. Now, he was head of the Crown Prosecution Service as Director of Public Prosecutions from 2008 to 2013. He was involved, in some of the prosecutions in terms of pushing a prosecution with the then Chief Prosecutor Nazir Afzal himself. Perhaps easier for him to do it at the time, given that he was himself Muslim. He got an awful lot of hate from some people in the Muslim community, but he pushed these prosecutions. Nigel Farage has been criticised by Elon Musk, but also so has the Prime Minister, so has Jess Phillips, the current Home Office Minister. Elon Musk called Jess Phillips an evil witch on Twitter last week, and a rape genocide apologist, said she'd be put in prison. Keir Starmer was asked about that at a speech he's just given in Surrey. He said, I think most people are more interested in what's going to happen to the NHS, frankly, than what's happening on Twitter. He said, child sexual exploitation is utterly sickening, and for many years, too many victims have been completely let down by perverse ideas about community relations. They've not been listened to and have not been heard. What do you make of Keir Starmer's role?
I feel he's extremely responsible for what's happened. I know the Rochdale case was under his watch. So I think it's fair to bring it into the specifics of that case, because I don't want to talk generally. I resigned because I did not agree with the decision-making on the Rochdale case. And Keir Starmer was Director of Public Prosecution. Nazir Afzal was the head of the CPS, or the Chief Prosecutor in Manchester. They were the ones responsible for not charging Adil Khan with rape of a 13-year-old child when we had a fetus. Yeah. They criminalised a young victim. They charged most of the men with trafficking. They were guilty of multiple rape, mass rape. So his judgment, for me, was completely slewed. I also know that he was the Director of Public Prosecutions when a circular was sent out to all police forces not to investigate these crimes because the children were making lifestyle choices. So
even though he didn't write that himself, he's often claimed since running for Prime Minister and since being Prime Minister that, he stands on his record as, as Director of Public Prosecutions. This is what he achieved. But during his time, a circular went out saying basically these underage girls, they want to be raped by these men as old as their dads.
100%. And for me, Julia, the book stops at the top. And you just mentioned Jess Phillips. Now, she is being made a scapegoat of.
Yeah, I think so.
It's not her. This is not her responsibility. This goes way, way back, way beyond her time.
Yeah. And she has been a long-term campaigner against, violence against women and girls.
And that detracts from the bigger picture because this is a whole army of people who have failed children. I mean, I remember Sarah Champion in Rotherham. I've met her many times. She was trying her absolute best.
She was the Labour MP, wasn't she?
She was the Labour MP, but she was sacked from a job for daring to speak the truth.
And Anne Cryer, another MP, spoke out, was criticised.
You know what you just said, Julia, about money and political parties. I've started my own charity, the Maggie Oliver Foundation. I do not take a penny from the government, from the authorities, because I want to speak the truth. Yeah. I do not want that connected with money. But every one of these politicians, they are controlled by a whip. There are good people in politics. There were good people in the police, but we are at the mercy of those at the top. Yeah. And unless you're prepared to do what I did, give your job up, give your home up, lose your life, your mental health, you should not have to make that choice when you are fighting for children who are being raped on a daily basis. But I just want to say that we at the foundation, we are building bridges with police forces. There are some good people, and I would include Greater Manchester Police in that. We've got some good contacts there. Things are by no means all hunky-dory, but communication is better. There is more public awareness, and it's a lot harder to bury these things. Yeah. But I do think we need an honesty and an openness to accept the facts
that it's been happening. But here's the thing. I mean, the battle went on for about 10 years about, was this effectively a race hate crime? And again, if it was a bunch of white men doing this to Muslim children, Muslim girls, I think we all know that A, it would have been prosecuted, and B, it would have been regarded as a race hate crime, which was certainly what it is. Now, you mentioned the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse. That report in 2022 by Professor Alexis Jay, pointing out, look, although technically, yes, we've had a report into this, it didn't really go into detail. It certainly didn't mention some of the Rochdale, in Telford, I think, and Rotherham, they weren't even gone into. There have been some independent reports sort of, into those local areas. Do you think it is time now for a proper independent report specifically into these rape grooming gangs?
What I would say, Julia, is with ICSA, with the National Abuse Inquiry, not one of 20 recommendations have been implemented. Yeah. We had £100 million, 7 years, a complex report. The grooming gang organised network strand was minute. What I would say is that it's okay to announce a public inquiry, but who is leading that inquiry? Yeah. What do they want to see?
Who would you trust to lead that inquiry, given we've seen such abject failure on the behalf of so many different organisations and individuals?
I would want it to be somebody who has no vested interest, so not a politician, no party political person, the strings not being pulled by those who have an axe to grind. So it must be people, it must be victims and survivors. It must be people like me who understand this inside out. I'm not just saying me, I'm not saying that. Somebody who's lived and breathed this, who doesn't want to coat things over, who wants to get to the real truth, to understand why. You know, if people from other cultures are going to come to the UK, they have to integrate, they have to follow our laws. And our laws say you can't have sex with a 12, 13-year-old child. And I'm sorry, the law is meant to be equal. Yeah. We are meant to operate with integrity, with fairness, with, you know, the law is not to choose. We prosecute a 24-year-old boy for having sex with a 15-year-old child, but we don't prosecute a 60-year-old imam in the mosque. I'm sorry, it might be an uncomfortable truth, and it is not a racist comment to say that.
Absolutely not. Just finally, Maggie, and you've just done such amazing work on this, and I do. A lot of people want to put the tuppence worth on social media. They want to have a go at this person, that one. If you want to do something to actually help these girls, give some money to the Maggie Oliver Foundation, a charity actually helping these girls. In reality, there'll be girls right now. There'll be families of girls right now. We know there've been cases where, you know, fathers have gone literally into a rape den. That's what they were, rape houses, to try and rescue their daughters, and they've ended up being arrested themselves. I mean, it's just extraordinary what's happened. There'll be families of girls might be listening right now. Like, what would you say to them?
To the families, if they need help, come to the foundation. We are there to offer emotional support and legal advocacy. And my value and the value of my amazing team of 40 now at the foundation is that we join the dots. It's not my place to tell their stories, but we spot the patterns. We are a voice alongside them, not instead of them. Yeah. And on the ITSA inquiry, the voices of the victims were squeezed out. You were quite right, Julia. Rotherham, Rochdale, Oxford, Telford, Huddersfield, all those towns and cities were blocked from that inquiry, as was I, as were other non-institutional experts. Why is that? Because they do not have any intention of getting to the truth. I want to see somebody who will, and it won't be a politician, and it won't be a member of the establishment. It will be somebody that the victims trust, that has got no vested interest to cover up the truth. You know, I've lost everything, but I am proud that I stood by what was true. The country knows that now. The blinkers are off in the country. We are still fighting the officials who continue to pretend this is not the problem it is. Awareness will bring change, and we shouldn't be splitting it into local problems.
This is on a national scale. I mean, it involves huge numbers of people. Maggie, we'll have to leave it there. Maggie Oliver, thank you so much. I'd like to point out she's joining us while she's away on holiday as well. So even, you know, you're always giving up your time, no matter what, to try and speak out on this issue. You have just been the most amazing hero, you know, fighter for these girls who had nobody in the authorities, who literally were paid to protect them, acting on their behalf. But former Detective Constable at Greater Manchester Police, whistleblower on the Rochdale grooming gang case, rape gang case, Maggie Oliver, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm sure that's echoed by all of my audience as well. Lots of people getting in touch on the phone line, 0344 499 1000. Commentator Sam Armstrong listening to all that in the studio. I mean, look, you know, I've spoken to Maggie about this for years. I mean, for years. You know, people like her doing this. You know, why is this story like such a surprise to so many politicians?
Well, and one of those politicians for whom it is a surprise is Keir Starmer. In the last few minutes, he's described recent claims about the grooming gangs as misinformation, and he's talked about far-right bile. And look, I think there will be millions of people in this country that will be sickened to hear their Prime Minister describe concerns over these cases as far-right, as misinformation. And do you know why they felt sickened? Because that's what the girls were told first too. That's what they were told. They were said, no, it can't be happening. It's not serious. Or if it is happening, it's just in a very local area. Or it's not a systemic area. Or if it is happening, it's got nothing to do with any one particular background of offender or not. And the likes of Andrew Norfolk at the Times and others who bravely reported on this story for years were derided as racist, as misinformation peddlers for years. And it carries on to this day. You've got a Prime Minister responding to it. And look, it's come about in a messy way. But look, the fact it took Elon Musk to trigger a national conversation about the fact that organised gangs of men are continuing to rape a particular category of women
right now
in dozens of towns and cities across our country is a source of shame, not a recipe to dismiss it.
Absolutely.
And the Prime Minister needs to get serious about this very quickly.
I think people are just fed up, but we all know it's two-tier justice. And the point is, like, they're not the only people who are abusing children, but they have not been arrested, have not been prosecuted en masse because of their ethnicity and their religion. And we know it, they know it, everyone knows it. And to pretend that that's just far-right bile is a load of abject nonsense. Now, let's take a quick call before we go to a break. Let's go to Anne, who is in Sussex. Hello, Anne.
Hello, Julia.
Hello, good morning. Happy New Year to you. What do you want to say?
Hey, what a year. Hello, Sam. Yes, Julia, this has been going on for 50 plus or more years. I encountered women who had gone through this back in the 70s. And in fact, only in the last 10 years, a woman here in mid-Sussex tried to prosecute the gang. But of course, she's just a vulnerable poor woman. They got off again. And this is happening. And one of the reasons that worries me, Julia, is that all across our society, you will see advertisements, magazines, people in the pop scene, all scantily clad. And our young, vulnerable girls think that is how you go out. That is how you dress. They don't know what images they're giving off.
How they're being perceived,
At a very young age, we used to, I did study women's history, we looked at the advertisements, we looked at what was going on. Now we don't educate boys or girls in the way that we need to.
Yeah, but listen, I'd say that, you know, these groomers, they were meeting kids in their school uniform. They weren't being scantily dressed then, were they? And we'll have to leave it there, but thank you so much. Do call in again. 0344 499 1000 is the number to have. You'll see we'll take plenty more calls in the 11 now. Up next, going to take a break, then we're going to get the latest on the weather warnings and how it's affecting your travel today and possibly over the rest of the week as well. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Out of hospital and treat them in the community where that's appropriate, getting rid of some of the pointless outpatient appointments that people don't need. So there are a wide range of reforms we're putting in place, as well as the investment to deliver the shorter waiting times and higher patient satisfaction that we had under the last Labour government that's been squandered in the last 14 years.
Now, you mentioned about the offering patients more choice. I believe that they could be offered anything up to 5 hospitals to choose from. How feasible is that?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Well, a very good morning to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Welcome back to the show. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Sam Armstrong all stays still with me. Lots of calls coming in about Elon Musk and Nigel Farage and whose side you're on, but also obviously the conversation we just had with the magnificent, the wonderful Maggie Oliver. We'll take a lot more of those calls after 11, I promise you. Right now, though, I do want to talk about the weather that is obsessing with a lot of people. I have to say, we've seen snow over large parts of the country. I know my daughter was out, I think, at midnight on Saturday night, building a snowman outside, all gone by the morning. The weather warnings say across large parts of the country. How bad is it and how much worse is it going to get? Let's talk to Claire Nasir, who's a meteorologist and weather presenter. Very good morning to you, Claire.
Good morning, Julia.
Good morning. So how bad is it across the country right now then?
Well, we woke up this morning in Cheshire, where I live, to another 4 or 5 centimetres of snow. My daughter's school was closed. My mother can't get across the country to go home today, so she's with us for another day. And that pretty much sets the scene for much of northern England, the far south of Scotland. But we have seen snow further south as well. The rain is retreating eastwards. On its back edge, the air is colder, hence the reason the rain has turned back to snow across some parts. Not only that, heavy rain overnight and also some snow melt over the last 24 hours. And that's all led to ice as well as flooding. So every type of hazard out there and some strong winds. So we're talking wind chill as well as everything else.
Yeah, it all piles on. Yeah, but the snow is always all very lovely, but difficult to drive some of the roads. The trains get delayed, the airports, some runways closed. And then, of course, the melting causes the next problem. And then the freezing after that point. Is this, and we've got, you know, these weather warnings across large parts of the country. These are likely to spread. I know, I mean, as also often happens to the media, you know, weather doesn't count unless it's in London. It's spreading further south, isn't it? What are we looking at for the rest of the week?
Well, yeah, that's really, I mean, it's going to be cold for the rest of the week, Julia, and bitter. I mean, temperatures could be as low as -12, -15 Celsius across the snowfields of northern England. I know, that is really frigid, isn't it? It really is. And that's going to continue. But we are now looking to the south of England, because not only through tomorrow we could see some wintry showers extend from central southern parts of Wales and the West Country eastwards towards the Midlands. So there could be some snowfall associated with that. But there's also a snow and ice warning on Wednesday for the far south. An area of rain will bump into the cold air across southern counties, and there is a risk of some snow. Some uncertainty about the distribution of this snow at the moment and how far north it will go, but there could be some disruption associated with that.
Do other countries have these weather warnings? I know America's obsessed with this now, weather forecasts and their news outlets, but I mean, you know, this isn't particularly unusual weather. I mean, you know, it is early January. We'd expect, you know, cold weather and snow and sleet and things. I mean, is this unusual?
Well, we don't get as many snow events as we used to in this country, and we tend to sort of grind to a halt when we see any sort of flake of snow fall through the sky. So that's one thing, really. Our infrastructure can't really cope with a lot of really bad wintry weather because we don't get a lot of it. Across Europe, temperatures, when they plummet, they do manage it much better, but they do have a warning system as well. So this weather here is now pushing towards Denmark, and they're going to get some really horrible conditions through the next 24 hours. So we're not alone, Julia.
All right, we're not alone. We'll feel better for that. Claire Nasir, meteorologist, thank you very much indeed for joining us. So, I do find it fascinating. You understand we're going to have a hurricane or a, you know, I mean, it's going to be 40 degrees plus or we're going to be, you know, minus. You know, people want to know in advance. That's what we have weather forecasts for, but people do get their knickers in a twist about pretty normal weather.
Well, I was going to say, every year since I've ever been alive, there has been a couple of cold snaps in January or February, never in December. Yeah. It's always in January and February where it snows, sometimes actually in March. You get that rogue week in March where it turns cold again. We get a little bit of snow. And look...
Everyone loses their minds.
We just heard, it's not only that we don't get it very often, we're actually having less of it than we used to do in this country, right? Despite all the predictions of extreme climate events.
Isn't this climate change is so difficult to keep up?
We're having fewer of them than we used to, and yet everything grinds to a halt. And you can only imagine that it has some relation, perhaps, just maybe, to the influx, the growth, the astronomical breeding of health and safety officers.
Well, yeah, I mean, so right, yeah, I mean, you know, don't send your child to school. They can't be in school because they might slip over in the playground. I mean, but they might slip over at home. I know when there have been snow days at my daughter's school, we head off to the nearest hill to go sledging. I mean, we want to slide down. That's kind of the deal. It is very bizarre, isn't it? We know, I mean, the Daily Star today predicted this would be like a double bumper of sickies today. First Monday for a lot of people back at work. And also, you know, people taking those Monday sickies anyway, like, well, what a good excuse. I have to say, yeah, walking up the road to the train this morning, very, very empty indeed on my show. I think a lot of schools aren't back until tomorrow. It's those dreaded, remember those inset days? But I was wondering also, there's an impact, of course, for this cold weather. I mean, everyone's putting their heating on. We had the heating on overnight. Try not to do that. You know, it ticks up the cost. Winter fuel allowance cuts. You know, best part of 10 million pensioners losing that. You know, we've actually had the government ministers saying, you know, put your heating on, turn your heating up because it's going to be cold. Well, a lot of people are worried about doing that for obvious reasons.
Yeah, and look, I'm amazed that more is not being made of this, because there will have been pensioners over this weekend that did not put their heating on, in part because they're worried about money, who would have previously received the winter fuel allowance, have not received it, and who have very, very tragically died in cold circumstances.
And people do die every year from cold. And by the way, is it 9 of you know, if you get 100% of the people who do die of weather-related things, you know, 9 out of 10 it's from cold, 1 out of 10 it's from heat. Cold kills.
Absolutely right. And there will have been people who this weekend died. I regret putting it this highly, or else I would if Labour hadn't predicted exactly the same. People will have died as a direct result of this decision taken by Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves.
Absolutely. Love to hear your thoughts on all the things we're talking about. Do get in touch. More, of course, on Elon Musk and Nigel Farage and all of that. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
A very good morning to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. Welcome back. If you're rejoining us from the last hour, so much to talk about today. And whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, it's great to have your company. Maybe you're one of those who's been, snowed in, having to take the day off because of the some flooding in the local area as a result of the weather warnings. Lovely to have you on board. Thank you very much. If you're taking a sickie because you can't be bothered to go in on a wet, miserable, cold Monday morning, get to work, for goodness sake. This country needs you. One man who has been at work today, of course, is Keir Starmer. He's back from his little holiday in Madeira, pushing in the queues. Yeah, well done. No one would think that would go badly for you, mate. And he has been speaking this morning, unveiling his plan to tackle NHS waiting lists, more community diagnostic centres, surgical hubs, more use of technology to improve patient choice and tackle inefficiencies. It all sounds great. Do you think it's actually going to improve things? Love to hear your thoughts on that. But big focus has actually been on Elon Musk calling for Nigel Farage to be replaced as leader of Reform UK. Nigel Farage, he said, doesn't have what it takes. It's all over a spat over Tommy Robinson and the grooming gangs. Well, the Prime Minister has been asked about the grooming gangs, and Elon Musk comments about him and indeed his Home Office Minister, Jess Phillips, in the last hour. And extraordinary. I mean, Elon Musk has been saying that, asking on Twitter whether the United States should liberate the people of Britain from their tyrannical government. Elon Musk has accused the Prime Minister of failing girls in Britain, but Keir Starmer has accused Elon Musk of spreading lies. He said those that are spreading lies and misinformation as far and as wide as possible, they are not interested in victims, they're interested in themselves. Those who are cheerleading Tommy Robinson are not interested in justice. They're supporting a man who went to prison for nearly collapsing a grooming case, a gang grooming case. So he's come out fighting, not directly attacking, not specifically stating Elon Musk irresponsible for those misinformation and lies, but love to hear your thoughts on all of that. Do get in touch. Whose side are you on, in particular between Elon Musk and Nigel Farage? What do you make of his criticisms of Jess Phillips, Elon Musk's criticisms of Keir Starmer, and Keir Starmer's attempt at a defence? Get in touch, give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK to 8 and your message to 87222. You can get in touch on X at talkTV, and of course calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. Also in this hour we are going to be talking about e-scooter collisions. They have trebled in just 3 years, causing a total now of 29 deaths and thousands of injuries. It's prompted more calls for an urgent change in the law. Going to be talking about that in the next hour. Also, after 12, we will be talking about Divorce Day. Today is first working Monday for most people in January. It's the day the divorce lawyers are at their busiest. We'll be talking to leading celebrity divorce lawyer Vanessa Lloyd-Platt very soon about that. Right now, let's introduce you to commentator Sam Armstrong, who's joining me in the studio throughout the show. Very good morning once again to you.
Good morning.
Now, we've been talking throughout the show about Elon Musk and Nigel Farage, but Keir Starmer is kind of like, I would say, basically stirred the fire up on this, accusing effectively Elon Musk of spreading lies and the misinformation. He's talked about far-right bile. Elon Musk seems to be in battles with pretty much everybody in this country right now. I mean, suggesting on Twitter, do we need to go and liberate the British from a tyrannical government? I didn't like what he said about Jess Phillips. Yeah, I can have my battles with Jess Phillips over various issues, but the idea that she is somehow should be imprisoned for her personal failures on grooming gangs is an abject nonsense. I don't even like Elon Musk calling for us to have another general election. I don't think, Elon, as clever as you are, you understand how our country works. Now, I don't think that we should have big billionaires, foreign or otherwise, funding our political parties. Unfortunately, if there's no other way of funding them, that's what's going to happen. However, there's a difference between him voicing his opinions, which he's totally entitled to do. You and I both feel very strongly about freedom of speech, and then we can give our opinions back. But it does seem to me that he is trying to influence, some might say inappropriately, British political processes. Whose side are you on when it comes to Elon Musk and Nigel Farage, and indeed Elon Musk and Keir Starmer?
Well, let's get a couple of things right, set out firstly. I think Elon is wrong on Nigel, he's wrong on Tommy, and he's wrong on a few bits. But, look, so far, all Elon Musk has done is express an opinion. He hasn't put any money into British politics. He's just said what he thinks. And, yeah, he's the wealthiest man on earth, but we don't exactly jump at every utterance of Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos or
don't we? It seems to me Bill Gates had far too much sodding influence in recent years.
But what I think this reflects is the fact that there is a massive unresolved sore at the heart of British politics around issues to do with multiculturalism, issues of race, issues of unresolved complexities of living in a multi-ethnic society. And our politicians are studiously ignoring talking about those, talking about immigration.
Shouting bigot and racist at anyone who does, people like me.
And the moment you do that, you leave this untapped, unresolved, unburnt-off energy of resentment, of animosity, of nervousness, of trepidation. And when somebody like Elon Musk comes in, and as I say, all he does is talk about it, everything blows up. Why? Because this was an issue that needed dealing with, still needs dealing with. And I don't think that the appropriate response in that circumstance is each and every time to shoot the messenger, as much as the messenger might have got it wrong.
And even in the same case, actually, with Tommy Robinson, because the battle between Elon Musk and Nigel Farage is clear. Nigel Farage, clearly Elon Musk has been persuaded by the various people like Ezra Levant and stuff who are, campaigning for Tommy Robinson, got a crowdfunder to, support Tommy's kids while he's behind bars, claiming that he's a political prisoner of some sort. He's not a political prisoner. He's behind bars for committing contempt of court after repeating again and again and again and again a horrific, untrue libel about a young child, a Muslim lad who was accused of, who was the victim of an attack, and then claims were that he'd actually been harassing girls. Totally untrue. Went to court. Tommy Robinson knew exactly what he was doing. Sorry, Stephen Yaxley-Lennon, when he broke the law again and again, and he knew this would be the outcome. You're playing martyr. Frankly, some people might choose to use the word grift at this point in terms of how much money does Tommy Robinson make when he's behind bars versus how much he makes when he's on holiday, which are the two things he alternates between doing, as far as we can tell. Now, here's the thing. It seems to me that Elon Musk has been listening to people on the far right in America who are playing this game. Elon Musk has believed all this stuff. The reality is, of course, that Tommy Robinson is a creation of the failures of Labour and the Tories to get to grips with this stuff. If you want to shout bigot, fascist, racist at everybody who says, maybe it's not a good idea to import millions of people from completely alien cultures, use that word alien cultures, where they do not share our values in Britain about democracy, about corruption. If you look at virtually all the allegations of vote fixing and things like that, almost entirely in communities where there is a large immigrant population, where they come from countries where there is just abject corruption on a grand scale, attitudes towards women, women's rights, attitudes towards people's right to leave their religion, to gay rights, you name it, across the board, freedom of speech and the like. You bring in millions of people from cultures where this is completely and utterly anathema to them. What did you think would happen? Well, people like me, and you as well, were saying, this might not be a good thing. I think this is going wrong. When you fail to tackle that, just say, oh, no, not happening, not a problem, you're just a racist. You create the Tommy Robinsons.
Yeah, and it's worse than that. It's also a combination of the factor that we have turned around as a society, as a political class, as an establishment, to millions of young, white, working-class men and said to them, no, you're the problem, it's you. Yeah. Despite the fact that you grow up in a council estate that is falling down, in a community where the jobs have long since moved away, in a school that is crumbling to the floor, you are in an incredibly privileged position. You're at the top of everything. Yeah. And in order to compensate against that, we're going to push you to the back. We're going to say that there is something problematic, quote-unquote problematic, about your whiteness, about your maleness, about the fact that you've got attitudes like being patriotic. Yeah. And these people have had enough, right? They have heard all of their lives that they're the problem, and they have been reacting and thinking, no, I'm not the problem. And is it any surprise that in those circumstances they run to people like Tommy Robinson, who put forward a strong, articulate, ultimately grossly mistaken view of what they are and who they are. But that
said, a lot of the stuff, and again, I'm no cheerleader for Stephen Yaxley-Lennon, which is his real name, of course, but he was raising a lot of issues which other people weren't, and he was right to do so. And there is a lot of stuff that he has said that is valid and should be listened to, and it gets dismissed because Tommy Robinson did it. There is an element also where other people don't touch some of these subjects because it's associated with him and the English Defence League as was, and the far right, and then you get into those arguments. Now, my thing is, it doesn't matter who says something. Is it true and is it valid? That's the crucial thing that we need to get to in this country. And there's no doubt at all, that the Labour Party, the Conservative Party, the Lib Dems, all the major parties abjectly, basically, they basically sacrificed thousands upon thousands of young white working class girls on the altar of multiculturalism and good community relations, as they call it. I don't want good community relations with somebody who is raping a 12-year-old girl. Thank you very much. I don't think that's I think I want that man to be having very bad community relations behind bars. And as so should everybody of whatever ethnicity, race, or religion. And anyone who doesn't speak up for this, I find it extraordinary. This is the thing, that abject failure needs to be spoken about. Is Elon Musk the right person to do it? Is Tommy Robinson the right person to do it? We spoke to Maggie Oliver, someone who actually gave up her career, lost her job, lost her livelihood to speak up on the issues, actually does proper help. There is an element where Keir Starmer is correct when he talks about people are not interested in victims, they're interested in themselves. They're stirring things up. But he talks about lies and misinformation. These aren't lies and misinformation. This is the truth.
No, and, well, look, he may well be right. Elon Musk and Tommy Robinson may well be more interested in themselves than the victims. But what about Keir Starmer? What about the rest of the people in the Labour Party government that right now are refusing to hold a full national independent inquiry into what happened? Do they care about the victims? Do they genuinely believe that refusing to hold an inquiry to get to the bottom of this once and for all is helping the victims? Or are they putting ahead of that their political convenience, their political
We know
interest?
there are a huge number of seats, particularly in the cabinet, where seats would face being lost if they lost a large percentage of voters who are Muslim in their local constituencies. It's a very big issue. Even in Keir Starmer's own seat, we saw Jonathan Ashworth would be in the cabinet, not because of this. We know that the Muslim vote, massive divides over the issue of Gaza, that had a big impact in the general election. That is a big factor. I mean, this is the thing. This shouldn't be an issue. At no point should this be... I couldn't care less what colour somebody is, that they're committing crimes against children. But the point is, the reason why this was allowed to carry on and is carrying on right now is because the authorities won't prosecute these men because of their ethnicity and their religion.
Yeah, and look, you only have to go back right to the beginning, 2003, when Channel 4 first made a documentary which touched upon the existence of this issue. What happened? They were bombarded with approaches, letters, concern from councils, police, etc. And what did those letters focus on most? Don't broadcast it before the local elections.
Yeah.
Labour have known for 2 decades or more that this is the great political liability they have in their absolute heartlands of heartlands, and they have been prepared to brush it under the carpet. Now, look, I'm sure that they say to themselves, look, keep it with the police, it doesn't need to be discussed in public, that's the appropriate way. I'm sure they have justified it to themselves. But let there be no doubt, the effect of that cover-up is this system has spread, has lingered, has gone on for far longer than it would have ever done if it was brought to the fore, if it was shown for what it was 20 years ago.
And again, that's a failure by Labour at the time. It's a failure by the Director of Public Prosecutions for 5 years, which is Keir Starmer relation. And it's a failure by the Tories over many years as well. And that's it. I mean, I wasn't so sure whether a new independent inquiry would make a difference, but at the end of the day, the old one barely touched the sides on this. As Maggie Oliver pointed out, we're looking at 10 days, and they spoke to chief constables and things, as opposed to talking to people like her, who are actually the whistleblowers. You've got to be talking to the whistleblowers. I think if the victims, the campaigners on their behalf, think that there needs to be a full inquiry, there needs to be a full inquiry. I wonder who we would even trust to carry that out, because pretty much anyone who'd be qualified to do it will be part of the establishment and part of that cover-up. That is the worry. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this. Going to get your calls. A couple of the big stories I want to get to as well. Small mention of that NHS reform stuff that the Prime Minister's talking about. I don't think anyone's even that convinced by any of this stuff, but we'll talk about that in a moment as well. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
take us on and accuse us of being lying and fraudulent
What's
about
happening
our
about
membership
that?
numbers.
Wasn't she asked to apologise?
We got a number of different media channels and journalists in to check the actual database, the back end, proved that we were right, she was completely wrong, and just said, look, we all make mistakes, just apologise, Kemi. She's refused to do that, so Nigel announced over the weekend that we're going to make our own constituency seat a key target at the next general election, just to give Kemi a little bit of something to think about.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Thank you very much indeed for your company. Sam Armstrong still with me. Sam, let's get to a couple of other stories. We talked an awful lot, obviously, about, it is the biggest story in town. There's Elon Musk and the rape gangs and battles with both Nigel Farage and indeed Keir Starmer. But let's talk about what the government wants us to be talking about today, although pretty much, as far as I could tell, all the questions to Keir Starmer after his speech on the NHS waiting list were about the issue of Elon Musk and other things. The government has announced their plan to cut NHS waiting lists. They're going to expand community diagnostic centres, surgical hubs. There's going to be more patient choice using more technology, expanding the NHS app, tackling inefficiencies, getting rid, for instance, 1 million appointments a year, which are apparently unnecessary follow-ups. Like, you had your treatment, how are you feeling? Fine, great. Bit of a waste of everyone's time, doctor and indeed patient. The thing about this is cutting NHS waiting lists to sort of get to a point where I think only 61% of people are going to be treated within 18 weeks. See a consultant within 18 weeks. That's a 4-month wait. So 4 out of 10 people aren't going to be doing that. It's up from about sort of around the 50% mark now, or 56% mark now. This seems to me to be a remarkably low ambition from a government that says they're going to sort out the NHS.
There is absolutely nothing in this announcement today that could not also have been announced by Rishi Sunak 6 months ago. This is tinkering at best. Look, what we're talking about here, community diagnostic centres. Basically, that's employing GPs rather than having a GP in a self-employed model to come and do some surge capacity. Fine.
See some actual patients.
We'll make a minor difference at best. Surgical hubs. It's moving the same surgeons into a slightly different way of working.
Working a 12-hour day, 7 days a week. Or 12 hours. Well, they won't all be there 12 hours.
This is all about 1% here, 2% here. Now, look, that is how you build efficiency. But this is not the radical reform that Wes Streeting came on this show and others and said, I am going to deliver. And by the way, people on our side of politics don't necessarily like him, turned around and said, you know what, Wes Streeting...
I've got a lot of time for Wes.
You're the minister that we trust, OK, actually out of all of this bunch.
He was the one who actually said the NHS needs reform.
And he said it. Now let's see it. And we are seeing precious little.
Tinkering around the edges, and basically it's just tiptoeing around the staff, isn't it? I mean, it's just... I mean, my thing is, like, you want to pay everyone time and a half to work at weekends or to work past, 5 p.m, fine. Well, that's a good way of spending money as far as I'm concerned.
But, Julia, let's be clear. Actually, the way that Keir Starmer thinks he's going to resolve the NHS, and by the way, he has to, it is the #1 priority of his voters and the voters that he has lost since the election by a country mile. So he has to fix it. The way he is going to solve it is going to be importing locum doctors, nurses, etc. from overseas to come in and provide surge capacity using that money you got out of the budget, particularly from the national insurance rise, to pay for it. That's how he's going to deal with it. But here's the thing. It's not a great story to tell. It's not a great story to say, look, we're importing a load of Egyptian and Libyan and all the other types of doctors that make up so much of our locum capacity. They're going to come in here, they're going to stay for a while, possibly forever, and they're going to help us get to the backlog by dealing with all of your appointments with your granny. That's what's actually happening. So he has to announce frankly, things that are precious little, because that's the only story he's got to tell.
Yeah, absolutely, very little to talk about there. Just finally, also, before we go to calls, he's also defended his Treasury Minister. This is Tulip Siddiq. She's actually my local MP for Hampton Highgate, a Labour MP. She is the niece of the ousted Bangladeshi Prime Minister, who's now facing huge corruption charges involving 4 billion quid's worth of money that was supposed to go to a dam, and basically it was accusations that it was basically embezzled by the family. Big question marks over Tulip Siddiq in a flat that she apparently owns, was gifted to her. She originally claimed to the newspapers when they inquired about this a couple of years ago that it was a flat that was gifted to her by her family. No, it wasn't. It turns out it was gifted to her by a political ally of her aunt. And that Tulip Siddiq herself is also on the list of people being investigated in Bangladesh on this corruption scandal. Now, given that Tulip Siddiq as City Minister, part of her job is the anti-corruption minister, big question marks about her and how her lifestyle is funded. Keir Starmer has said that she acted entirely properly in referring herself to independent advisor on ministerial standards amid questions over the use of this property linked to her aunt. Downing Street say they're standing by her. How long do you think that line's going to last?
Well, look, here's the thing about this scandal. If the shoe was on the other foot, Labour would be howling to high heaven about this issue. It has the whiff of gross impropriety. And the difficulty that Keir Starmer has got is he is not in control of this process, because there is an investigation going on in Bangladesh into Tulip Siddiqi's aunt and the regime that she ran. And it is going to uncover and bring out more and more and more. The safest, easiest thing to do would be for her to leave now quietly, say there's no impropriety here, I don't want to be a distraction, to go. But, and this is where it gets interesting, Tulip Siddiq and Keir Starmer are constituency neighbours. Yeah. They go on holiday together, they have dinner at each other's houses, and we saw it with Tory Prime Ministers, we're going to see it with Labour ones too, because at the end of the day, they're human. When it's your friend, when it's your mate, you apply a different standard.
Absolutely.
And Sir Righteous Keir Starmer is just as bad as it's going to transpire as the last lot.
Yeah, well, imagine everyone's shock and surprise. Yeah, well, anyway, let's go to the phone lines. There are a lot of you getting in touch. Our question today, Elon Musk has called for Nigel Farage to be replaced as the leader of Reform UK, claiming he doesn't have what it takes. Whose side are you on? Look, this is all basically about whether or not Tommy Robinson should have a role in reform or not. And this is over, really, Elon Musk getting involved in the child grooming rape gangs story, his accusations against Keir Starmer and indeed Home Office Minister Jess Phillips. Keir Starmer has basically sort of hit back today without naming Elon Musk, but saying, you know, look, lies and misinformation, talking about far-right bile. Love to hear your thoughts on all of this. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. James has done just that. He is in London. Hello, James. What do you want to say?
Yeah, hiya, Julia. Julia, I was I'm just mystified that Mr. Starmer in Surrey today comes across poisons the well about the conversation straight away by saying it's far-right poison, it's misinformation, it's lies. No, Mr. Starmer. We are fully aware of the circular sent out by the former Prime Minister, Gordon Brown, to all the police chiefs, stating that these girls, it was a way of life, a way of choice, and for them to drop. And to Jess Phillips, to come out with this nonsense when this is a woman that was heckled and harassed by Muslim men, even at the count at the general election, and she then has the gall to turn round and say it's men. She will not drill down to Pacifics, and for them to say that we are not under a tyrant. We have a two-tier police system, a two-tier justice system. We have a media that will blanket ban anything that is said about this grooming gangs, and they will then poison the well, Julia, to make sure that if you do talk about it, you're a bigot, you're a fascist, you're a racist.
And you're a associate journalist. I had to point out that, you know, it was Andrew of Norfolk, an investigative reporter on the Times newspaper, which is in this very building, that actually broke that story publicly, the first media organisation to do so. Incredible reporting by him, and very brave reporting as well. So, I mean, you know, there hasn't been a media blackout on this. There's just an element where, you know, it's an ongoing story, and lots of things don't get talked about every single day, even though they're ongoing and they're happening every day. But there is still an issue where people are uncomfortable about who the perpetrators are. That's the thing that I find extraordinary. I couldn't care less who the perpetrators are. I want them to be stopped.
Julia, and that speech in the House of Lords by Lord Pemberton 6 years ago when he mentioned 250,000 white girls, and then he mentioned that the perpetrators, the gasp was when the perpetrators were mentioned, not the fact a quarter of a million children have been systematically raped in this country.
But why do you think that is? Do you think there's just a whole established thing, and again, it's not just Labour and the Lib Dems and the Greens, and it's the Tories through and through as well, whereas, much of the media class, all the great and the good, that there's just this idea that multiculturalism, diversity, good, all immigration, good, this is it, and anything that gets in the way of that must be dismissed as racism and bigotry. When even when the facts are really clear that, I mean, these are people who... I've had Ofcom complaints when I've talked about, importing a load of people from North Africa and the Middle East where they don't share the same, attitudes towards women and sexual assault and things as we do here in the UK. And I got an Ofcom complaint. I mean, obviously, we batted it away with, facts and official statistics proving that is an issue with migrants from particularly those areas. But why do you think so many people are putting their heads in the sand and pretending that people from certain countries and cultures don't share our values?
Because they don't live with them in the places
Very
that
true.
It happens. They live down in metropolitan London where they're having their cocktails and their evening parties, and they're talking about how racist and how far right the working class is.
Yeah.
I'm sick to death of it. 250,000 children were raped 6 years ago. God knows what it is today. The only problem is the Labour Party don't care about them because the children can't vote.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, they want to give everyone the vote, but but not worried about them just yet. James, thank you for that. And I know it's still happening ongoing. I've got a very good friend who's a detective, and part of her job is to deal with the girls who are literally being groomed and raped right now. And the trouble is, you've got, 13, 14, 15-year-old girls who are absolutely convinced, because of the way this sophisticated grooming goes on, that these men in their, 30s and 40s and 50s are their boyfriends, the only attention they've ever had. And they're literally trying to piece together information and facts and evidence now. So in the hope that in the future, when they can persuade these girls to prosecute and be witnesses, they can actually prosecute these men. It's happening right now. I mean, I've got to be honest with you, I don't know how you can do a job like that where you're literally having to talk to children who are being the victims of grooming rapists, and just basically you're just trying okay, what was the number plate of his car? What was he wearing? Can you give me some details of the house where you were raped by the other three men? Literally trying to put that stuff together. And yet these men are still in this country. It's just, it's so terrifying. Let's go to another phone call now. Dave is in East Yorkshire. Hello, Dave.
Good morning. Good morning, Julia.
Good
morning. I agree with sort of 98% of everything you say. I guess the vast majority of your listeners feel the same. But on the Tommy Robinson issue, he's in prison for contempt of court, specifically for showing a video that told a story. I'm not sure.
That was wrong. That was a lie. It told a horribly libelous lie about a young boy.
And says the judge that that was a sole arbitrator.
Yes.
Tommy Robinson went on a Jeremy Paxman interview on Newsnight in 2013, saying exactly the same as what you're saying today. He's been mischaracterised by the British media for years and years, and in the same way you've been mischaracterised. Donald Trump's been mischaracterised. Is he a Nazi? We don't think so. And Nigel Farage has been mischaracterised as a racist, and all these you're all victims of the mainstream media. The thing about it is nowadays is that people like me and many others do not listen to the BBC anymore. We've all woken up. We've all woken up, and it makes no sense for people who all feel the same. You, Nigel Farage, Tommy Robinson. It makes no sense to have a spat. When, Tommy Robinson doesn't want to join Reform. He's not asked to join Reform.
No, exactly. But Nigel Farage didn't start that spat. I've never started a spat with Tommy Robinson. I've had some very unpleasant tweets from him over the years.
Yeah, he doesn't need to say anything negative about Tommy Robinson. Tommy Robinson's family, his motivation for his activism started with his cousin who was a victim of a grooming gang. And that's where this all started.
I've said it for years. There's some things that Tommy Robinson has said. The trouble is, Tommy Robinson also has form in other areas, and
listen, we've all got a past. What I would say though is on this issue, you said when you two were speaking. Well, I'm not sure why this has become an issue again. The reason it's become an issue again is because Tommy Robinson's in prison, and that's what's raised this issue. And that's
not why he's in. It's got nothing to do with why he's in prison.
I'm not saying it is.
It's because some people on the right in America have convinced people like Elon Musk on social media that Tommy Robinson is a political prisoner. He's not a political prisoner. He's banged to rights in prison for committing a crime.
I agree. I'm not disputing that. I'm talking about the issue, the central issue of the rape gangs.
Yeah, but Tommy Robinson wasn't the only. Everyone pretends he was the only person speaking about this. This was in the Times newspaper. It was. People were talking about this. He made it harder for people to talk about it.
Watch the video. Do your own research by all means, but watch this 5-part series, The Rape of Britain. These things were being made. The journalism, the work that goes behind these things, nobody else was talking about them. They
were. That's the whole point. They were. That's the lie. They were.
Now, listen, as Maggie Oliver says, it gets 5 minutes, as she said, and she's the best person to say on this, it gets 5 minutes of a little bit of airtime, but nothing gets done. And that's Maggie Oliver's words, not mine. And so it'll go away again. We'll part this, and nothing's really happening. And, we all agree. I agree with what you say. I agree. I want Nigel Farage to be the next Prime Minister, but it doesn't need to alienate a huge number of people.
But him saying, I don't think Tommy Robinson is right for reform is not the same as attacking or starting a spat.
He's not asked to join reform. There's a big difference between... And you two are both, being high-handed. Tommy Robinson comes from a council estate. In his early days, he didn't have any media training.
I don't look down on him because of his background. I think he's a highly intelligent, very clever man. He's said some very important things, important messages. But he's also a deeply flawed character.
That's all we need. Yes, and we're all flawed. And we're all flawed, but the central thing behind it is that you, Nigel Farage, Tommy Robinson agree on 95% of the things that we want for this country. You've got a daughter, I've got 2 daughters. Yep. I worry about their future. I lay awake at night worrying about their future.
All right, Dave, I really appreciate your call. It's an excellent call. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. Thank you very much. Love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. 11:37 is the time. We are going to be talking about these bid to tackle the NHS waiting list with a former NHS Trust chairman. Is what's being announced today going to make any difference at all? We'll find out. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 11:39 is the time. Let's talk right now about the latest wheeze to tackle NHS waiting lists, because this one is going to work. No, really, it will. Prime Minister's rolled up his sleeves and everything today to make his speech, so you know he means business. Let's talk about it with Martin Gower, former NHS Trust Chairman. Martin, have you rolled your sleeves up today?
I don't know.
Well, I don't know if you're serious then, because rolling your sleeves up is the indicator, is it not? Martin, Prime Minister announced, I mean, in the wake of course, West Street and the Health Secretary, this plan, sort of, more, local diagnostic hubs, more this, more that, using technology, getting rid of some of the unnecessary follow-up appointments that don't really serve any purpose. Is any of this going to make a real difference to NHS waiting lists?
Well, much of it isn't going to happen, Julia. I mean, I'm looking at the kind of details both from Wes Streeting and the Prime Minister. I mean, frankly, most of it's verbiage. Most of it actually was happening anyway. I finished my term in the NHS as a chairman in mid-2020. We were already setting up diagnostic hubs then.
What does a diagnostic hub even mean? Are these sort of almost effective little GP units set up in a shopping centre or in a supermarket, or?
No, I think it's a bit not quite that. I mean, where I live, we have a diagnostic hub in our local. It's called a hospital, but it's not a hospital. There's no beds there. It's really just a hub of a hospital. Yeah. But you can go there for an MRI scan. You can go there and have other diagnostic tests done.
But is this is stuff that you don't just walk in off the street? This is stuff your GP's referred you to?
Well, I don't think anybody... I mean, he's saying that you can make your appointments when you're around the shopping centre. That's not going to happen. It's not going to be in shopping centres at all. And why would it be? What he is trying to do is to say we can do more things closer to home. Yeah. I mean, Starmer is saying he's going to drag care out of hospitals into the community. Well, guess what? Unless that is combined, if you have a community service, particularly for older people, it needs to combine social care, community nursing, probably mental health care, because some of them may well be cognitively limited as well. Now, we did this. In the last trust I worked with, we did it. We had a service called Home First. The local authority delegated the social care to us, and we combined it with our mental health care services as well, and it works. And it can work. It didn't work because anybody in Westminster told us to.
Just you made it work. Well, this is it. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're going to have more diagnostic hubs, more more MRI scans or whatever carried out, you're going to need more staff to do it. The idea is that these things will be open 7 days a week, 12 hours each day, and actually be available. You won't shut down at 4 o'clock on a Friday, which would make sense. I've always found that quite bizarre. That's pretty much what happens in most NHS hospitals, apart from emergency care. But I mean, you're going to need to hire more staff. It isn't one of the biggest issues we've got in the NHS that they've got basically 120,000 plus staff shortages. They actually can't find the people to do the scans, the surgeons, the nurses, or the other people.
No, they can't.
So where are they getting them from?
Well, they'll get them from abroad, I suspect.
As Sam was saying earlier.
And then you meet all the language issues and all the rest when they come in. Even so, there are many things that could happen. And will only, I mean, my trust in politicians getting anywhere near our health services diminished by the minute. And today's lot from Starmer and Streeting today have just accelerated that.
Well, I don't know. I prefer the politicians to be running things than the NHS chiefs, because with all due respect, at least our politicians are vaguely accountable. NHS chiefs seem to be allowed to fail again and again and again and get basically a pay rise and a promotion.
I think that there's great merit in that. I mean, there are some very good, very competent managers in the NHS, people I've worked with who undoubtedly would have made it in the private sector as well. Very capable, very competent, very committed. And people say, oh, we pay them too much. I don't agree with that either, actually. If you compared my last trust, 8,500 employees, 420 million income, the chief executive of an operation like that needed to be paid very well.
Well, apart from the fact they get a much greater pension they would in the private sector, and apparently an awful lot more job security, perhaps that's not a good thing. Isn't there really an issue, though, if you're not tackling the issue of social care? I mean, again, we're treating the health secretary as the health and social care secretary. We had that changing job title some years back. But they kicked that into the long grass over the Christmas period to saying, oh, well, you know, we're going to have another review. That's what we need, another review. Oh, it needs to be cross-party. I don't know anyone in any party who doesn't think we need to resolve the social care issue. Until you take social care into being a national government issue so that there is an incentive, you know, it's part of the NHS, so there's an incentive to spend money on the much cheaper social care to prevent the drain on the NHS resources of people being bed blockers or going into hospital unnecessarily. You're never going to resolve any of the issues in the NHS, are you?
No, it's not going to happen. I mean, as I said, in my last trust, where I was a chairman, the local authority delegated 500 social care workers to work in teams with community nurses and mental health nurses and other people in the community. That can be done. This is the problem with the NHS. There are plenty of local systems that work really well. Where I live, happily, we have some very good people there, and it works exceptionally well. I have no issues in South Warwickshire with any health issues at all. However, that's not because we were told to or given guidance.
Just did it because it was good management. Well, here's the thing. One of the things those who want to do is use AI and use more tech and improve the NHS app. And so, you know, you can sort your appointment online. You can move it online. It's the worst thing. You get a letter. Again, a letter rather than email, even though you've given all your information to the consultant or the doctor. You get a letter saying, oh, you've got an appointment whenever it is. It's either already happened or it's at a time or a date you can't do it. You're not even, you know, you're at work or you're abroad, and then you try and rearrange it. It's virtually impossible to do that. No one answers the phone, no one replies to emails. Letting people make those appointments at a time convenient for them, but also rearrange appointments, but also get notified and, you know, reminded of appointments. Surely, instead of saying, look, every hospital and every trust should be doing this, surely the answer should be any hospital or trust that isn't already doing this, that management should be sacked because they're clearly complete idiots and utterly incompetent and incapable of doing their job.
That's a very fair point, Julia, but where are you going to get the replacements from?
Frankly, I'm sure there's some dogs that need a home, you know, some dogs' homes in January who would do a better job than some NHS trust managers, surely.
Well, yes, and if you look at somebody with the right skills to do that job and you try and attract them from the private sector, you will be paying a great deal more than you pay those NHS guys.
I thought we already paid them a fortune too because we're competing with the private sector.
They are not, Julia, they're not really paid a fortune. If you think about it, people in the private sector don't have the media focus on them. I mean, an NHS Trust chief executive has about the same life period in that job as a football, you know, a Premier League manager does. And indeed,
well,
Mr.
they do if they're not very good. Well, I mean, if we need to pay a lot more to get good people, that's fine. What bothers me is we're paying a lot of money for people who aren't very good, which seems to be the issue. Martin Gower, former NHS Trust Chair, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Sam Armstrong, I'll just come back to you on this. I mean, this is the thing. It's the idea. I mean, these people, I found virtually all of these people earn more than the Prime Minister.
Only one statistic you need to know. In 90% of NHS trusts last year, not a single manager was fired for poor performance.
So don't they all we need?
There is not an industry on earth in which 90% of businesses aren't firing people for poor performance. If you're not sacking people when they muck it up, when they're not turning up, when they're hardly doing anything, you're going to keep having this bad performance.
But it's so basic to me, this whole idea that's like, oh, well, everyone needs to learn from best practice. If you're not wanting to do that already, you're already rubbish as far as I'm concerned. I mean, you know, if your patients at your trust don't get a text message saying, just to remind you next week, if you need to cancel, let us know now. If you're not sending that out, you're already so beyond incompetent, you shouldn't be in that job.
Why should they do any of this stuff? They're riding their way to a pension. This
Absolutely.
is what the people
Was it 20? Is it 20?
NHS
20% of their income goes into pensions from the employer? Yeah. Yeah, in the private sector. You getting that? Bet you're not, because literally no one is. Anyway, more from Sam and more coming up. We're going to be talking about e-scooters and the incredible trebling in the last 3 years of e-scooter collisions. 29 deaths in the last few years, thousands of injuries. When is there going to be a change in the law? We'll talk about that up next. This is Talk.
Graham. Good evening and welcome to Plank of the Week. I'm Mike Graham and this, of course, is Talk. I think he was shocked. You could see the genuine shock.
I was like that.
Sees the boats coming in. Right, let's have the women and children first. He went, oh, just you lads, is it?
Yeah. He's been allowed to develop into this huge sort of problem for the BBC.
Yeah.
He'd love it, wouldn't he?
He would love it. That's why we're not doing it.
That's why we're not doing it.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
This is indeed Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. Let's talk right now about e-scooters, the bane of many of our lives. E-scooter collisions have trebled in the last 3 years, according to new research. It's prompting calls for an urgent change in the law. A total of 29 people have died since 2022 to 2023 in a huge number of collisions, 4,500 e-scooter collisions, including 4,800 injuries. 1,400 of those are serious. Bearing in mind mind. I've seen plenty of people who've had e-scooter collisions and they have not reported them. So that is just the tip of the iceberg. The president of the AA, the motoring group, Edmund King, says these figures show a worrying trend, needs to be nipped in the bud by legislation and better police enforcement. And safety campaigners, including the family of the first pedestrian killed in an e-scooter collision, want legal safeguards on their use and want police to enforce the rules, banning them from pavements. That would be a good start, wouldn't it? Let's talk about this with Ollie Chadwick, who joins us once again. He's MD at Naught Technology. They manufacture as well as retail e-scooters. Very good morning to you, Ollie.
Morning, Julia.
Thank you very much, Steve, for joining us. Look, you know, you sell a legal product, people have got a right to use it. I mean, although, you know, they're not supposed to be ridden on the pavement at all. Presumably, you would welcome enforcement of the law.
Absolutely, yes. It's what's needed. The UK has fallen well behind our counterparts in Europe and the wider world. We do need regulation. Much of Europe have been able to do it with varying degree of stringency. So, yes, the government needs to do it. There was some positive progress made with the former Transport Secretary, and we're hoping that continues with the new one.
What sort of things have other countries in Europe done that we've yet to do?
So Germany's a good example to look at. So Germany's implemented a speed requirement. So it's limited to 12.5 miles an hour. But critically, for a lot of people, they have mandatory insurance. So the scooter has to have third-party liability insurance. You can extend that to have fully comprehensive. So if you do, you know, run into somebody or their vehicle or whatever, you are covered.
Yeah.
It's relatively inexpensive, you know, 30 euros up to 80 euros. And critically, they have to have the model and make of the scooter to know that it's compatible. So the manufacturer, like us, need to produce a product that is certified to their regulation.
And does it also have to have the licence plate? That's a crucial thing for me. Cyclists and e-scooters just need to have a licence plate so you can clearly identify it. And the same as with a car. You know, there's a speeding, a speeding camera showing you your car is speeding. If you're not willing to identify someone who was driving the car at the time, you take the responsibility, end of. We need to have an ability to formally identify the owner of that scooter, do we not?
Yes, and that's what it does. It's got a little license plate on the back. Other things, they've got to have reflectors, lights, bell. You know, it's not an unknown what the government need to do. It's
pretty basic, isn't it?
Proven.
I mean, frankly, a lot of those rules, again, I'd like them on bicycles as well, whether they're e-bikes or not. But there's a particular issue with the e-scooters, with people riding them routinely on the pavement. And I see a lot of young lads, you know, the hoodie lads doing it round my way. But I also see a lot of, you know, middle-aged people who, frankly, should know an awful lot better. Plus how people leave them on the pavement. It's just literally like, oh, I'll just get off now at the corner. I'll just leave it here in the middle of the pavement. You know, forget someone who's disabled or pushing a buggy or, you know, blind. Yeah, don't worry about them. How do we tackle that?
So I think it's worth noting that the dumping and abandonment is only the case with rental scooters. Now, privately owned scooters, which what the Transport Secretary previous said they want to bring in, that wouldn't be the case there.
Yeah.
You know, that's with the rental companies. They can put bigger fines on the user if they want. They've got their driving licenses. They've got their card details.
Yeah.
You know, we'll agree to the terms and conditions. Barcelona, for example, now have brought in fines for riding on the pavement of 500 euros.
Yes.
Sounds like quite a lot.
Sounds like a very good deterrent to me.
Well, exactly. It shouldn't be an issue. You know, if you know that makes people think otherwise about it, then it's working. So all of this is achievable, can be done. You know, I would credit the previous Transport Secretary who did make positive strides in our industry. And
you're talking about the Tory one as opposed to Labour?
Well, no. So the previous. We have so many of these days. Previous Labour one.
Try to keep up. I'll name that Transport Secretary in three.
Paddy Alexander is now now the Transport Secretary. But yes, you know, it needs to continue, and you know, like we've said, it can be done, has been done, and we just need to adapt and do that.
Why has it not been done? We've had all these trials on the rental ones, and again, you know, technically speaking, you know, the only ones allowed to be ridden on the roads at the current time. You know, but we know this is widespread. I mean, it seems to me that our entire pavement and road network has been given up to largely young lads who want to get around quickly in their hoodies, you know, wearing black day and night, on their phones, with their headphones on. They're a danger to themselves and others. Frankly, if one of these kids gets knocked off and kills himself, well, that's on them as far as I'm concerned. I'm not, you know, that's their choice. But they are a danger to other people. Why has there been such a delay in dealing with this? We've got this new mode of transport, and yet we're going to wait like 5-10 years to bring in laws around enforcing the safety of these things.
It unfortunately seems to be typical of the government that we have, previous and at the minute. But, the transport that they bring has been exponential in growth. It's become very quick. COVID saw a real boost in them. Trials were brought in with the idea that they would bring data to then legalise them. Now they keep extending the trials, which is fine. But it does need to be a point where they bring legalisation in for these scooters. People's habits have changed. Certainly younger people. Not only drive is expensive, the cost of a vehicle is expensive. They see this as a cheap, affordable way of transport and a good way to get about. A lot of younger people probably don't know the risk or involved with that. So better education is required. And certainly mandatory helmet usage.
Yeah, that I can't see. They don't even bring that in for bicycles, do they? And often they're going really fast as well. Ollie Chadwick, I think we're on the same page there. MD at Naught Technology. They manufacture and retail e-scooters. Thank you very much indeed. Sam Armstrong, these are the bane of my local area. What about you?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, everybody agrees on what needs to be done.
Why don't they just get on and do it?
Obvious. Just do it. Just pass.
Why didn't your lot do it?
Well, because they didn't do very much at all in the last 3 years.
Honestly, whenever there's a Tory saying anything about anything now, I think, you were in power 14 years. These things have been around for quite a few. Honestly, I genuinely, I'm loving it. €500 fines, a licence plate, it's done. Job done. Anyway, we're going to talk about more important things with Brendan O'Neill from Spiked Online up next. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
A very good afternoon to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. Very much appreciate your company, whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device. It's great to be back on air. It's great to be back in the hot seat, and great also to be joined by you. And indeed, Sam Armstrong is a commentator who's joining me for the whole show. Lots more to help guests coming up in the next hour. I do want to hear more from you. We'll get more of your calls. Elon Musk has called for Nigel Farage to be replaced as the leader of Reform UK, claiming he doesn't have what it takes. So whose side side are you on? Also, whose side are you on when it comes to Keir Starmer and Elon Musk? Elon Musk has basically said, like, we've got a tyrannical government. The US should step in and rescue Britain. He's accused of the Prime Minister of failing on grooming gangs. The Prime Minister this morning has hit back. He's accused politicians of jumping on a bandwagon of the far right. He's also accused of, well, it doesn't name Elon Musk specifically, but he's talked about how those that are spreading lies and misinformation as far and as wide as possible, they're not interested in victims, Keir Starmer said this morning, they're interested in themselves. Those who are cheerleading Tommy Robinson, as indeed Elon Musk has been, that was the root of the dispute with Nigel Farage. Keir Starmer says those who are cheerleading Tommy Robinson are not interested in justice. They're supporting a man who went to prison for nearly collapsing a grooming case, a gang grooming case. He says those attacking Jess Phillips, who I'm proud to call a colleague and a friend, are not protecting victims. I mean, you know, this has got really quite heated. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on whose side you're on all of that. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk, as well as your message to 87222. Get in touch on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. Also, going to be talking this hour about foreign nationals being more than 3 times as likely to be arrested for sexual offences as British citizens. That's according to new analysis revealing the true scale of crime by migrants. We're also going to be talking about the 2 candidates vying to lead the Muslim Council for Britain, basically completely, I mean, a body that supposedly represents Muslim community in this country, completely and utterly, you know, set up by Muslim men to represent, they claim, the Muslim community, such as the Muslim community is one body. But these 2 candidates have praised Iran and said that men and women celebrating New Year together is un-Islamic. Is this not all part of the problem we're talking about? Plus, today is Divorce Day. Yes, the first working Monday in January is the day when divorce lawyers see their busiest day, with couples splitting after the Christmas break. We'll be talking to one of Britain's leading divorce lawyers about that. Sam Armstrong, before we get to our next guest, let's just touch on, can we, these figures about foreigners being 3 times as likely to be arrested for sex offences as British citizens. It's actually 3.5 times more. This ties in very closely, does it not, with the grooming gangs, the rape gang story, which is that it was, you know, British Pakistani men. Some actually were dual nationals, were not born in this country. Others weren't born in this country, but immigrant families coming in from a country with a very alien culture, a very different attitude towards girls and towards women and their rights, and to whether or not it's women's job to basically cover up, so that if a man looks at them and wants to rape them, he won't because they're covered up. Which is, if no one has been to countries which have this view, they really do exist. That is a widespread view in largely most Muslim countries around the world, is it not? What do you make of these stats?
Well, I think firstly there is the overall picture, which is concerning, and it ought to tell us that we have imported, in part, a huge problem into our country. But let's take a step back from the sex offences and just look at the general arrest figures. Yeah. The average Brit, there's 12 Brits are arrested for every 1,000 people every year. That's the stats, about 0.1% people are arrested every year. Different categories of immigrants have drastically different arrest rates. Albanians, 210 arrests per 1,000 people. They're more than 20 times more likely to be arrested than the average person. Afghanis, 107 arrests per 1,000. Iraqis, 93. Algerians, 73. Congolese,
There's a pattern
73.
here, isn't there? And how are the French? The French and Italians who are here, they a big issue? The Dutch?
Well, exactly
funnily
so.
enough.
But look, you go down to other categories of migrants, including those from, say, Asia, the Indian subcontinent. Sri Lankans, it's down to 17. Different cultures, different ways of life, integrate better or worse with the UK. Kerry Badenoch has said this in the past. She said, look, there is not one standard of culture. Some cultures are better than others. And one of the things...
They were all supposed to gasp at that, as if that's not blatantly obvious.
One of the things we know about a culture that permeates certain parts of Pakistan, and Andrew Norfolk did some incredibly interesting research about this, it's not even all of Pakistan. It's certain provinces, certain regions that have centred in certain areas of our urban towns, have grossly disproportionate negative consequences because they have appalling views to women, especially white women. And we're expected to believe that whenever somebody comes into the UK, they come as this kind of perfectly untouched, unmoulded figure that will miraculously integrate into our glorious multicultural society. And the truth is, it just ain't so. And this conversation has been, beyond any other, silenced, hidden away for decades in this country. It has been impossible to say, no, do you know what? There is a certain type of culture that comes from Pakistan, there's a certain type of culture that comes from Yemen, there's a certain type of culture that comes from South Africa. And all of these are different. Some of them are capable of integrating at a much faster rate into our society than others.
And some of them we don't want. They are. Are we allowed to say that? Oh, I don't care. Some of them we don't want. We're not sure they're good for it. I mean, again, all I know is as a woman, I've travelled a lot around the world. I am fully aware of how differently I have to behave, how I am treated, how safe I feel, depending on the culture of that country. But we're invited to think that, again, multiculturalism is good, diversity is good, and yet somehow we have to ignore the fact that those cultures are completely different.
And that puts the lie to what the government says, because on the one hand you have the Foreign Office saying, if you're travelling to this country,
be careful.
Be very careful as a single woman. And then on the other hand, we're here and they're saying there is no racial or cultural link to this pattern of offending.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, exactly. Well, look, let's talk to my next guest about this and all the other big stories in the news. Brendan O'Neill, I'm delighted to say, joins us, chief political writer at Spiked Online. A very good afternoon to you, Brendan.
Hi, Julia. How are you doing?
Very well indeed. Thank you very much indeed. Well, look, what we've just been talking about very much ties in with, the grooming gang scandal, the rape gang scandal, let's call it what it actually is. What were they grooming them for? Rape. That's what they were doing. We know that is impacting today, right now and tomorrow. It will carry on impacting thousands upon thousands of young girls, white working-class girls, deliberately chosen, it came clear in a lot of the court cases, by men of largely British Pakistani heritage, because they were, frankly, they were fodder. They were seen as of low value and easy pickings. And for many, many years, these men were not prosecuted. Now, Keir Starmer has come under fire from Elon Musk over this issue in the last week. Keir Starmer has now hit back today. He's accused of politicians of jumping on the bandwagon of the far right by jumping on this. He says, my record, it is open. There's nothing secret about being Director of Public Prosecutions. Every single case I prosecuted went to court, was looked at by a judge. He's also very thinly veiled criticism back of Elon Musk, saying there are those that are spreading lies and misinformation as far and as wide as possible, not interested in victims. He's also talked about people cheerleading Tommy Robinson, not being interested in justice. He's also talked about this as people, preying, on the far right. What do you make of this big spat and how this row has exploded back onto the political scene?
Yeah, it's become really huge in 2025. I'm not sure many of us expected that to happen, although I think it's a good thing that it has happened, because the rape gang scandal is arguably the worst scandal of the post-war period. And we sometimes forget just how bad it was. I mean, we're talking about thousands of girls, mostly white working class girls, but other working class girls too, who were groomed, exploited, abused and raped by gangs of mostly Pakistani men. I mean, this was really a serious epidemic of crime. And of course, the worst aspect of it is that social workers, local officials and the police often look the other way. These girls were sacrificed to political correctness. That is what happened. There is a layer of bureaucracy in this country that would rather protect the ideology of multiculturalism than protect girls from rape. And when you think that that's the country we live in, you know how serious this problem is. So, where Elon Musk is wrong is when he says that the British media has never talked about this and no one in Britain has talked about it. That is not true. The Times covered this for years and years. People like you, Julia, and me and others have been talking about it for a long time. But where he might have a point is that we've never really had a reckoning with this crime. We've never had a reckoning with this atrocity.
Yeah, and there was that independent, review into sexual abuse cases. But as Maggie Oliver was telling us on the show, she was the Rochdale whistleblower, that actually, there were only 10 days spent dealing with this particular issue of grooming gangs. It was a very small part. People like her weren't able to speak. Victims weren't able to speak. They spoke to chief constables who were part of the problem rather than part of the solution.
Absolutely right. And it just hasn't had the same level of interrogation or attention as other problems. I mean, you will remember the Me Too period when a middle-class journalist having a hand put on her knee would be on the front page of the papers. It would be on Newsnight. While at the same time, the degradation and rape of working-class girls was very often played down or sometimes ignored. So there is a black hole where we need to have an honest, open, democratic discussion about this problem. And the problem we have at the moment, on one side we have Elon Musk, who is being a bit crude in how he's talking about this issue, and he doesn't seem to understand it very well. But then on the other side, we have Keir Starmer and the rest of the Labour government who still don't want to get to grips with it. So it's kind of the worst of both worlds, and I just wish a chink of sunlight would come through and we could have an honest debate about the whole problem.
And this is it. We've not been able to have an honest debate for a very long time, because anyone who did raise this, you know, even Andrew Norfolk, the journalist at the Times, who was the first to write about it in the mainstream media, would just, you know, everyone just shouts bigot, racist and the like. There is a real concern that Labour, because of their already problems they've got in terms of the split Muslim vote, 80% of Muslims in this country vote Labour typically, but we did see that split over Gaza, pressure on a lot of, you know, front bench Labour people to you know, to basically sort of to kowtow and not trying to say the right things. We've even had the Prime Minister sort of, you know, nodding along absurdly and terrifyingly to a backbench Muslim Labour MP, suggesting we should have a blasphemy law in this country at PMQs a few weeks back. They are very worried about losing the Muslim vote in a lot of key seats, particularly front benches seats. Do you think that's one of the reasons why they are not agreeing to a full independent public inquiry?
Absolutely, no question at all. I find the Islamophobia discussion so worrying. You know, Julia, tomorrow is the 10th anniversary of the Charlie Hebdo massacre. 10 years since cartoonists and writers were slaughtered in their offices for supposedly being Islamophobic, for making fun of Muhammad, for making fun of Islam, for satirizing a religion. The fact that we're still talking in Britain in 2025 about potentially outlawing Islamophobia or clamping down on Islamophobia 10 years after that massacre really proves we have not learned the lessons. And the lesson is that the Islamophobia is a sneaky word that really means you're not allowed to criticize a particular religion. You're not allowed to criticize certain practices. You're not allowed to say anything about the Quran or about certain Muslim practices that people might find problematic. All of that is now crushed under the guise of clamping down on Islamophobia. And that is unquestionably one of the reasons that the grooming gang scandal, as it was called for a long time, was not given the attention it deserved, because people feared being called Islamophobic, people feared being called racist, and those accusations were used cynically to silence discussion on this social problem. And that's where censorship leads us, and that's got to stop.
Absolutely. And again, this idea of this, you know, new definition of Islamophobia, as you say, which is basically any criticism of the, you know, the Islam religion is quite absurd. I mean, you know, of course we should be allowed to criticise religions. That's what things you can do in a free country, in a democracy. I have to say, I thought things were really bad under the Tories. Wow. I mean, I've said this a million times since they've been in. I had no idea it was going to get this bad under Labour. Can I ask you about another story, which, again, I think is linked into this in terms of you know, the sort of votes that Labour say they want to get. Look, you know, they've didn't get anything like the sort of the 45% plus they were predicted in many of the polls in the July election. They were down to 34%. Yet they've got a massive, whopping great majority with 412 MPs. But it looks like a very thin majority. Their poll ratings have absolutely plummeted. A poll I think the Mail on Sunday did yesterday, see the majority of people in this country don't even think Keir Starmer will be Prime Minister in a year's time. Now, I'm not quite sure what mechanism they think there is for getting rid of him. I mean, unless Elon Musk just gets his way and we just have general elections at a billionaire's whim, which seems to be what he thinks. But there's now also some concern about election vote rigging. Now, calling in, you know, for ending the requirement to have ID at elections, which was brought in at the last local and general election. Also allowing 16 and 17-year-olds to vote. I don't know why their children, they shouldn't be voting, or they're already allowed in Scotland in their elections. But also possibly allowing some, apologies, 5 million foreign citizens to vote. What do you make of that?
It's a form of gerrymandering. That's what's going on here. You know, the votes for 16-year-olds, that's a form of generational gerrymandering, because we know that they're young and they're not really world-wise, and they're probably, as a result, more likely to vote Labour. That seems to be the case. Inviting foreign nationals to have the right to vote seems to me completely bizarre, and it waters down the entire meaning of democracy, which is that you should be a citizen of the nation, you should have lived here for a substantial amount of time, you should have contributed to a substantial amount of time before you have the right to decide the fate of the nation. That is part and parcel of what it means to be a real democracy. And, you know, in relation to the vote rigging, to me, it makes perfect sense that you would need a form of ID to vote. I mean, I don't think that's a burdensome thing. I would want... You know, I don't want my vote to be taken by someone else. I'm very happy to bring my passport in order that I can vote. So all these different mechanisms, it seems, are designed to ensure that Labour stays in power.
Yeah. Well, there was some criticism of the Tories over the ID that was allowed, and I've certainly noticed that, you know, knowing a lot of young people, it was a particular issue that loads of ID involving being a pensioner was allowed to be used and travel, but not, for instance, you know, your student... you know, rail card wouldn't be allowed, even though you actually have to send off, you know, a picture of your passport and have everything verified, or your birth certificate to get those things. So we do need to make it much easier, and obviously has to be completely free and quickly available for young people to register to vote. So it's available to everybody. But it seems to me to be, you know, I always go back to, you know, Blockbuster Video, because I am that old. You needed to show more ID to rent a sodding video, VHS at Blockbuster years back, than you do to vote, which seems crazy.
Oh, absolutely. I completely agree about ID. It should be pretty broad and it should be really straightforward, because the right to vote is such an important right. So people should be able to access it straightforwardly, but at the same time, people shouldn't be able to steal our votes or commit fraud or pretend to be us in the polling booth. But, you know, the Labour government, it really speaks to how aloof and cut off they are from a large section of the public, that they have become obsessed with this kind of electoral rigging, because they know that lots of working class voters in particular have lost faith in them. Lots of people are going to be moving towards reform. This government, in its first, however long it's been, 7 months, has been awful, even worse than some of us expected. They said it was the return of the experts, the adults coming back into the room to restore normalcy. But it's been 7 months of chaos, betrayal, taking away the winter fuel allowance, stabbing people in the back, betraying electoral promises, one after another. So people are sick and tired of this government, and Labour, I think, is going to try to do more rigging in order to try not to lose next time round.
I don't see how they do it, but it is extraordinary. You know, 6 months in, you just think, wow, it feels like they've been in for 4 years. It's got that sort of feel already, hasn't it? Just finally, I want to ask you about what I've put on my news. Is Happy Justin news today. Justin Welby today steps down as the Archbishop of Canterbury at the age of 69. I have to say, the man has left with no glory whatsoever, embarrassed himself in his final sort of goodbye speech in the House of Lords. It was so flippant and casual, you know, when in fact, you know, the reason he's stepping down is because his abject failure to, again, looking at the grooming gangs, to protect children from, you know, paedophile priests in the Church of England. But equally, another Justin likely to be in the news in the next couple of days. Justin Trudeau is now expected to resign within a matter of days as the Prime Minister of Canada. Now, given that you and I, you know, were keen anti-lockdown campaigners, Justin Trudeau was hailed as Mr. Liberal, was he not, in Canada, and actually turned out to be the most outrageous authoritarian when it came to lockdown policies and the like. Good riddance to both Justins, I would suggest.
I agree. And in fact, both of them are representative of just how hubris, you know, the woke hubris. That's what they both represent. So with Justin Welby, he refused for such a long time to take responsibility for some of the offences in his own church, while at the same time telling the rest of us to atone for the sins of slavery, or to atone for what happened to George Floyd, he said at that time, and to take all statues that have anything to do with slavery or colonialism out of your local churches. He was constantly berating us to atone for the crimes of history, but he wouldn't atone for the crimes within his own institution. And then you have Justin Trudeau, who was a wolf in sheep's clothing, a tyrant in liberal clothing. He enforced an extraordinarily stern lockdown. He attacked the truckers' protesters. That was the protesters of truck drivers who didn't want to have to jump through certain hoops before they could do their job.
Well, no, basically being required to have a vaccine, which they didn't want or need, but required to basically lose their bodily autonomy.
That's right. And because they protested against it, he refused to give them the funding that they raised. He tried to block their ability to protest. He demonized them as racist and Islamophobes and transphobes, bizarrely. Yeah. He used every insult against them. He was a tyrannical figure who was disguised himself as this trendy, hip, lovely liberal. Yeah. So I'd say good riddance to both Justins, and I hope better leaders come into the Church of England and Canada.
Hear to that. Brendan O'Neill, thank you so much for joining us. Brendan O'Neill, Chief Political Writer at Spiked Online. Thank you very much, Steve, for that. Sam Armstrong, I'm sure, as a free speech union campaigner, certainly the likelihood, fingers crossed, everyone, that Justin Trudeau, goes the way of other very pro-lockdown type, the New Zealand. I tried to forget her name. Who was that awful woman who
Jacinda?
See, I just try to block it. All the J's. Let's hope he does go and fall on his sword. He's not a popular figure. It was amazing he got re-elected as it was. With a massively reduced number of MPs in the Canadian Parliament. Good riddance to him if he does go.
Yeah, go woke, go broke. And if he doesn't go voluntarily, well, boy, do the Canadian polls look bleak for him. The Canadian Conservatives are up by over 20 points on top of him. There are some polls that would suggest they would be reduced. Justin Trudeau's party would be reduced to just 3 seats left in Parliament.
Excellent.
He has completely and utterly decimated his political movement for a generation.
Absolutely extraordinary. And again, just an utter hypocrite on all these things, as they all were. Anyway, 12:23 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. Up next, we're going to be talking about the 2 candidates vying to lead the Muslim Council of Britain, having some very, very questionable views. By the way, tying in very closely with, again, what we've been talking about all today, and also whether or not there should be a new definition of Islamophobia to add into equality laws. The answer to that, by the way, is no. We'll talk about that up next. This is Talk.
Basically saying what he thinks and saying it unfiltered. He said it about his own car in terms of Tesla before, when the stock prices drastically dropped. He said negative things about his own company, his own people, multiple times. He did it once on a Joe Rogan podcast. So it's quite Elon Musk-like behaviour in terms of just speaking his thoughts. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think Reform obviously needs to just stay strong as a political party and almost be like, thank you, you're doing amazing work, but we are going to govern how we decide to govern.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On the app. On your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Sam Armstrong is also with me. We're joined now by writer and commentator Momas Najmi to talk about, Islamophobia and also the Muslim Council. They've got elections for electing their new Secretary-General. A very good morning to you, Momas.
Morning.
Thank you so much for... Oh, morning. Good afternoon, actually. What am I saying?
Oh,
good
yeah.
afternoon. Yes, very, I can understand your hesitation there. Now, just talk specifically about the Muslim Council, first of all, because as of tomorrow, we've got the first hustings between two candidates vying to lead the Muslim Council. This is Dr. Mohammed Adris and Dr. Mohammed Wajid Akhtar. They're going to be questioned about their views and things. Now, in a report by Policy Exchange, the think tank, they say they've discovered deeply disturbing remarks by both of the men, according to a former Muslim MP. Comments from 2022, Akhtar called being a Muslim an act of revolutionary defiance at odds with the prevailing culture, advocating that British Muslims identify primarily as Muslim rather than as British. Akhtar also said in 2012 Muslims shouldn't take part in New Year's celebrations because it involves un-Islamic practices such as mixed gender events where people dance and sing songs. It is necessarily, he says, an Islam-free zone. Adris wrote a glowing report of the Iranian regime in 2017 after a trip to Tehran, praising Khomeini, the former supreme leader of Iran, and the Iranian Revolution, despite country carrying out executions for blasphemy that year. Now, they've been criticised by the Labour MP for Perry Bar Birmingham, that's Khalid Mahmood, certainly a friend of the show here. What do you make of the fact this body that claims to be the representation of the Muslim community, such as it is one community in Britain, being basically facing leadership from one of these two men?
Well, I would say, what would be the criteria of leading the Muslim Council? I would say, the best criteria would be for the people to be Muslim, to be practicing Muslim, and to believe in the core teachings of Islam. And by that standard, those two are actually fit for purpose, because that's what the Islamic beliefs are. So what the situation that we have over here is that the views that they hold are right from Islamic point of view, but they are wrong from the Western point of view. And that should tell us all we actually need to know about Islam and having a Muslim council within Britain.
But you were raised as a Muslim, but you left Islam 18 years ago because you decided you didn't agree with the teachings. Are you saying that the teachings of Islam are incompatible with Western values?
I think so. We are seeing it. I don't need to say it, right? So we are questioning right now these two people having these views that are unacceptable to the Western mind, right? So, but their views are okay according to Islamic teachings.
Yeah.
So I don't need to say it. The example is us having a discussion means that it is not compatible.
Well, would their views be considered mainstream to many of those involved in deciding who the next leader of the Muslim Council is? Because, I mean, I've never been that convinced by how much the Muslim Council of Britain actually represents all Muslim people in this country. I mean, I'm not sure that anyone could represent all atheists or all Catholics or all, Scientologists even.
I would say that's a fair point, but I think so the purpose of Muslim Council is not really to represent Muslims, but rather to represent Islam within Britain, right? So they do represent Islam. Muslims, there would be a lot of Muslims who don't even know, most of the moderate Muslims, they don't really know their own religion. So we can't really hold them as an expert in their own religion because they don't know it. Yeah. So there will be no moderate Muslims who would occupy these positions, let's say as an imam in a mosque, or the lead of a Muslim council, because they don't know their religion. These positions will be held by people who actually believe in Islam, which is incompatible with West, and so they will shape the narrative within their council, through their council, and other people, other moderate Muslim people who are even going to the mosque every now and then will have to vote for them as well, because they have no knowledge to, go against them.
Yeah. I mean, so by definition, I mean, again, it's like you think leaders, the Catholic Church or Church of England, they're going to be more sort of hard line in their religious views than the average person who perhaps pops to, mass on Christmas Eve in a church once a year. In terms of whether or not these people, these men are, and it's always men, interestingly, whether they are a threat to Britain in terms of their views. I mean, look, I believe in freedom of speech. If that's what they believe, I'd rather we know that that's what they believe. But in terms of them playing that role in the Muslim Council of Britain, an organisation which has had an awful lot of influence on government policy over many years. And we used to receive, I believe it used to receive quite a lot of government money, I believe, at one point. Is that something we should be worried about?
I think so. That's something that we should have been worried about for a very, very, very long time. It's not that these two men are a threat. I think so is the ideology itself that is a threat, right? So these two men would be replaced by some other two men or some other four men or it will keep on going, right? So as long as we do not recognize that Islamic ideology itself is incompatible and poses itself as a threat, and then we can't get anywhere, because as soon as when the numbers are lower and they are more moderates, then it's not a threat. Mm-hmm. The more the numbers start growing, the more confident they become. And then we have this woke idea that we have introduced that, cling back to your heritage, to your own roots and your identity. So what are we expecting? Because when a moderate person goes back and reforms themselves as a proper Muslim, they will become a threat to Islam individually, and then collectively they will. It's not as if I'm saying that it's something radical or anything. This is just going to happen. It's not just Islam. So if a load of communists were given such things, or Nazis were given free reign to do it, they will collectively collect together and they will become a threat. But it's for us to recognize that this ideology is a problem. We keep on thinking that Islam is not a problem because we base it on our moderate Muslim friends. But Ahmed down the pub, he has a drink with me. He's not a problem. But you know what? Ahmed doesn't know his own religion himself. So he's not supposed to be doing things that he is doing. So because these people don't actually reject the ideology itself, leave the ideology themselves, they keep it alive.
Right.
And out of them comes the idea that, okay, let's say if I am a moderate Muslim, there's no guarantee that my children will be moderate Muslim, right?
And we have actually seen, haven't we, in terms of terrorism, it's often actually second generation where children perhaps feel they're being pulled in two different directions and feel they don't belong. Can I ask you about, this demand we've had from a Labour Muslim MP for a blasphemy law, obviously for all religions, but let's face it, we already have a de facto blasphemy law when it comes to Islam. In a way we can criticise any other religion and not worry about our family being murdered. And I'm sorry, it's as simple as that. The only reason there's some things I don't say is because I'd quite like to stay alive and I'd like my family to stay alive. And I know people who have said things which I consider to be perfectly reasonable, have faced death threats, and some people have actually been murdered, in this country and others. But Sir Keir Starmer is being urged to shelve plans for an official state government definition of Islamophobia, particularly related to the grooming and the rape gang scandal, basically saying that if we have very strict definition that Labour Party has signed up to, basically it means you can't, obviously, someone who's hating Muslim people as a whole or hating an individual Muslim person because of their religion, clearly that is not acceptable. But someone criticising the teachings of Islam or criticising organised religion of Islam, that should clearly be allowed in a free democratic country. What do you make of that definition of Islamophobia?
Well, actually, I think so. Obviously, Islamophobia was created for a very particular reason, to silence even people like me, because I am under more threat than anyone else having the religion, criticizing the religion.
Well, the punishment for that is death, is it not?
It is. Yes, it's most definitely is death. And even for moderate Muslims who are considered as munafiqs, as hypocrites, Allah says in the Quran that He's never going to forgive them. So it's even worse for them as well.
Yeah.
But this whole term of Islamophobia was also merged with something else. It was merged with communism. So this was a marriage between Islam and communism, right? And what we see is the Marxist elements within Labour. They want to promote this idea of Islamophobia, because under the guise of Islamophobia, they can control a lot of other speeches, a lot of other criticisms against Marxism. So it comes within a package. That's why they both are together.
Very interesting. Momus Najmi, your time's against us. Have to leave it there. But Momus, writer and commentator, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Sam Armstrong, particularly with your Free Speech Union hat on, what did you make of what Momus Najmi had to say?
Well, look, I think that there are real threats to ex-Muslims in this country that are tremendously concerning. And, of course, not just ex-Muslims. Ahmadiyya Muslims, who are one particular sect of the faith, are enormously persecuted. We have seen terrorist attacks on them for expressing their own religious beliefs. And, of course, Islamophobia definitions never seem to protect them. No. They never seem to protect those that aren't popular with a certain kind of narrow, extreme views that dominate too much of...
I just don't think any religion... And this, you know, you should be free to say anything of any organisation or belief system, to laugh at it, to mock it, to criticise it, to, you know...
And look, arguably, like, if they're so right, they'll be proven right in the end.
Yes.
So, you know, more for us for
apparently I'm going to hell, but, you know, I won't be, because it doesn't exist, in my view. So there we are. I'll live with that, or die with it, whichever. So be it. 12:38 is the time. We're going to take a quick break, and we are going to take your calls, more calls, particularly on the spats between... We started off, it was all about Elon Musk and Nigel Farage. Now it's Elon Musk and Keir Starmer. Love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Sam Armstrong still with me. Elon Musk and his battles with Nigel Farage were our topic of conversation when we first started today. Then we had questions being asked of Keir Starmer about criticism of him from Elon Musk. And, well, look, criticism really not finally veiled at all from Keir Starmer to Elon Musk, basically talking about how he was, talking about people getting on a far-right bandwagon, saying that I think most people are more interested, he says, in what's going on in the NHS and what's happening on Twitter, but basically saying there's people spreading lies and misinformation as far and wide as possible. They're not interested in victims, and they say that far-right bandwagon line. Elon Musk has responded saying... Well, after this a tweet where someone's pointing out that Starmer practically says that anyone demanding a new inquiry into how the rape gang issue was handled is part of the far right. Elon Musk has tweeted in the last 6 minutes, "What an insane thing to say. The real reason is that it would show how Starmer repeatedly ignored the pleas of vast numbers of little girls and their parents in order to secure political support. Starmer is utterly despicable." Sam Armstrong, I mean, the war of words continues. Now, I mean, Keir Starmer, has defended his Home Office Minister, Jess Phillips, who was called vile and should be in prison by Elon Musk. Elon Musk is kind of going in on this. Is any of this helpful to the young girls and their families who are still dealing today either with the aftermath of what happened to them or actually being victims of rape gangs right now today? Or is this just a war of words between a lot of men with very big egos?
Well, look, first thing to say is we are talking about it, which is more than can be said than when before Elon Musk did get involved. But look, if Keir Starmer wants to resolve this, if he wants to put this to bed, if he wants to stop this being a political issue, there's a very simple option. Call an independent, judge-led inquiry, make it a judicial process, say, look, I can't comment until the end of the inquiry, and he could put it to bed. There is a massive question, and I think it's a legitimate question, as to why Keir Starmer, to why an entire political class have for so long been reticent, have been resistant, have put off, have done everything possible to avoid getting to the bottom of what really happened here. It passes every single test for an inquiry. It's still going on. We could learn lessons. It was a genuinely national issue. It was a phenomenon. It had serious consequences for thousands of victims. If it was any other issue, an inquiry would have been...
I mean, there have been inquiries into
ago.
far less things. I do always wonder about the whole inquiry thing, though. They take so long. They cost so much money. I think the money is a small matter right now. But do they actually resolve anything? Especially as you look at, other inquiries where they don't actually enact any of the recommendations. And actually, what we need is just like, right, all the whistleblowers, everyone involved, the girls, the victims, the families, right, we just can have one port of call where name the names of the people who turned a blind eye, who knew what was going on, who did nothing. We want their names, and then we want those people to answer for themselves. And then we, listen, I mean, and I'm with Elon Musk on this one, because some of those people need to be behind bars, end of story, as well as, frankly, more of the grooming and rape gang, those actual men should be behind bars. Look, let's go to the phone lines, 0344 499 1000. Kirsten is in West London. Hello, Kirsten, what do you want to say?
Hi, good afternoon. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you as well. I wish it was a happier New Year, better subjects to talk about than this awful story, but it's a good thing we're talking about it, right?
Yes, it is. And actually, that's why I got in touch, I don't know, like 2 hours ago, but your producer just called me. So I don't see the point in bashing whether it's Tommy Robinson talking about Elon Musk or Farage. I think, just like Maggie Oliver said, we need to focusing on the girls.
Yeah.
I have a 6-year-old girl, which 2 years ago, she started being told by her Muslim classmates that she was a dirty girl for eating pork.
Really?
That was one of the many, many things that happened in that school.
Can I just say, if she had said the equivalent to her Muslim classmates, she'd have a non-crime hate incident against her by now.
The school did nothing on several occasions. Ours was not nearly as bad as other instances with other classmates of my son, who's 2 years older than she is. So I think, look, I'm a Honduran, I'm an immigrant, I am now a British citizen, but when I went to the US to live there, I was a law-abiding immigrant. Same when I came here. One needs to abide by the laws of the country that is
and welcome the culture as well. I don't understand people going to live in a country and saying, oh, I disapprove and disagree with all of this, but I'll live here. Well, don't live there then. I don't live in Saudi Arabia for a reason.
Well, exactly, and that's the thing. Like I had a friend who was stopped in the Middle East because her brother hugged her in public. So I had warned her, be careful, you don't do this sort of things. So it's the same here. Why? I wouldn't expect all Hondurans to come here and you to speak Spanish.
Yeah, it is interesting, isn't it? Yeah, we're always supposed to, when in Rome, do as the Romans do, apart from if you come to Britain when, absolutely fine. Again, I've never understood, I'm with Kemi Badenoch on this, she's quite right, we have a superior culture. If you want to come and live here, that's the culture, end of. Thank you very much, nothing to discuss. Kirsten, thank you very much. That's absolutely awful what happened to your daughter there. Let's get to some of your texts and tweets before we get to another call. Darren says, we asked earlier, whose side are you on between Elon Musk and Nigel Farage? The conversation has moved on a lot since then. Darren said his arrogant response vis-a-vis Tommy Robinson also upset many reform supporters. Natalie says Tommy Robinson has done valuable activist work in exposing grooming gangs, is being persecuted by the governments for his activism, but is not a good fit for reform because he's not a politician. He's not being persecuted by the government for his activism. He's banged to rights behind bars for breaking the law. He did not expose the grooming gangs. That was mainstream journalists who did that, and whistleblowers like Maggie Oliver. Dylan says Nigel Farage is the perfect leader for reform. Elon can call for what he likes, not going to get it, getting a bit too big for his boots. That's kind of where I am on this. And Damien says, bad move by Nigel. He chose to throw Tommy under the bus, which has upset Musk. He didn't throw Tommy under the bus. Tommy threw himself under the bus. Sarah says, I think it would be wise for Elon to butt out of UK politics, focus on fixing America. And Ryan says, I like Nigel, but I've always had a suspicion that he's not as strong as he wants you to believe. Reform will still get my vote, though. I think he showed he's very strong on this issue. Let's go to another call. Brian is on the line. He's in Wigan. Hello, Brian.
Good afternoon, Julian. Happy New Year to you,
Happy New Year. Thank you. What do you want to say?
Julian, a few years ago, there was an incident in Yorkshire about a school teacher who was trying to teach blasphemy laws. And he was hounded out.
Talking about the Batley Grammar School teacher.
Correct.
Yeah.
You saw the imams, you saw the community leaders in front of TVs as quickly as possible, even standing on the same platform as the chief constables. Where are these people now? They are nowhere to be seen. The hypocrisy of this is just amazing.
Yeah, well, there's loads of evidence that these men, even when it was just well known that these grooming rape gangs, that they were they were acting, and everyone was just turning a blind eye, including local councillors who were Muslim.
Well, it's crazy because there's there was a councillor in Oldham who was in charge of child protection, who was actually feeding the gangs with girls.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. It's just an extraordinary... Yeah, I just don't believe it in any of this idea that there are community leaders of any community, personally, such as that, someone is in a community simply because they share a certain ethnicity or a certain religion. Brian, thank you very much for that. I've got to go to a break. Up next, we are going to be talking about why today, the first working Monday in January, is Divorce Day. We'll be talking to leading divorce lawyer Vanessa Lloyd-Platt. This is Talk, Home of Common Sense.
and he's sitting there, and what's being done about it? Nothing. I mean,
well, that's not.
And the spurious reason that he was
the reason, Errol,
his reason that he was put in because he didn't attend a court appearance. I mean, that's laughable, you know. I mean, that's totally laughable.
Well, I mean, the fact is that he had an opportunity to not be in contempt of court. He chose to be in contempt of court, and that's why he's in prison. So he's in there really because of his own actions, Errol.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Well, after a pretty heavy conversation all since 10 o'clock today, let's move on to a lighter topic, the small matter of family breakup and divorce. Because today is the first working Monday of January, is Divorce Day. Well, let's talk to Vanessa Lloyd-Platt, who's a leading divorce lawyer and joins us now. A very good afternoon to you, Vanessa.
And to you, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Well, it's going to be a busy day for you and your fellow divorce lawyers, because this is a day when people go, well, we stayed together for the Christmas period for the kids, or they go, well, we thought everything was OK, but God, if I spend another minute with my other half, it's over. This is the day people go to the divorce lawyers. I mean, is it becoming a worse problem, or fewer people getting divorced? What are the latest stats?
Well, if you talk to a lot of lawyers today, there's quite a few coming out and saying there's no such thing as Divorce Day on the 6th of January. And there's even some divorce lawyers saying don't get divorced. So it's a very strange approach. However, we have normally found that the worst time for people coming in, or the best time for us, is the end of January or beginning of February. It's like we've got the first day of the sales on. It really does become quite overwhelming. And the reason why is Christmas can be wonderful for some people, but it can be a nightmare for others, and particularly clashes over family issues. Yeah. Why are we spending more money on your family than mine? Why your family coming over so much, not mine? Spending so much time together when people are used to having some kind of independence from each other.
Well, going to work, getting away. Obviously, do what I do, by the way, much easier. Just go abroad. Don't deal with any of it. It's really, really easy. But I read something today about how unhappy couples are now delaying divorce because of money worries, and actually there are couples who are staying together because they just simply can't afford not to stay together. They can't afford to split into two separate homes.
Well, this has been the problem that we saw the year before last. Last year was our busiest year ever. And it was, but when there was the announcement about the budget, people went into spasm. Even couples that were going through divorce said, let's wait, let's stop, let's halt the proceedings at the moment, because we are so worried about how we are going to deal with all of this financially. But now they are coming back again, having seen that they can cope with what is now going into recession. But whenever there is a recession or financial worries, there is a slowdown in divorce.
And it doesn't mean people are happier, because we know money worries is a massive issue for many couples. It's just because they can't afford to break up.
Well, that's right. And what we are seeing is even people that we are divorcing are still staying living together because they can't afford to sell the home straight away, or there are problems with the taxes now that they're having to pay, etc. But one of the important issues that we really want to emphasise is if you are going to get divorced, don't give up your pension rights, particularly if you're a woman, straight away. Do discuss it with the lawyer. Do think through whether you want to trade off your pension to keep more of the house or the house itself, because many women in particular, we are discovering, are really missing out on that issue.
And you don't pay for it now, but you'll pay for it later. I mean, the thing is, the reality is, I've read some interesting stats on this, that actually most people who get divorced, unless you've been in an incredibly abusive, controlling, very unpleasant relationship, that actually most people aren't any happier after divorce than they were before.
My clients are.
I'm better off. If I ever do get divorced, Vanessa, I mean, you're definitely the first call I make.
Oh, bless. But no, it's very important that people do think through very carefully at this time of year what they want to do. Some people react and just think we've had enough, and then they rush into our office. Don't do that. Think it through, and we will discuss through with people the pros and cons. There are times when we say to people, look, it really is not worth getting divorced. You will be so worse off.
You've actually taught people out. Very fascinating. Vanessa Lloyd-Platt, thank you very much indeed. Sam Armstrong, you're not married. It's not an issue. If you have to say, I'd never make my husband that happy.
I have to say, I've got bizarrely strong views on this. I think divorce is far too easy to get.
I agree with you. If you've got kids and you haven't gone to at least 6 months of counselling, I think it's immoral.
Yeah, and what is our response? Is to make it even easier to say that you don't have to prove fault of any kind. You can get divorced just on a whim. I think these are bizarrely dangerous things to be doing as a society.
Yeah, getting married should be harder, I think, actually, weirdly, making that commitment. But that's, if he doesn't want to put a ring on your finger, maybe he's telling you something, ladies, is also my view. But there we are. Fascinating, that conversation. Ian Collins, would you ever make Mrs. Collins happy enough to, happy by divorcing her?
Well, I'd have to marry her first.